Greetings, everyone. This is Bat-Kun, and this anime is truly unique. In it, we follow the group called the Silverwang Battalion, which is facing an immense dragon. But even with all of their combined strength, they are no match for the beast. It lashes its tail through the air with lethal precision, forcing them to jump to avoid the crushing blow. They counterattack with their powerful strikes, but their weapons cannot pierce the dragon's thick hide. The dragon then begins to gather energy to launch a deadly attack. But the group's mage quickly raises a magical barrier to protect them. However, she is not strong enough to completely block the assault. When the shield is shattered, the group's cook named Dennis rushes forward, using his own body to shield the mage from the dragon's flame. A flame strikes the woman's arm, so Dennis quickly prepares a magical potion for her, advising her not to lose her concentration, which relieves the group's sub-captain named Kate, since Dennis is always there providing support. However, the group's leader named Vigo does not seem impressed by Dennis's demonstration of compassion. In reality, he appears quite irritated, and so, Vigo channels his frustration into a devastating attack that impacts directly on the dragon's eye, causing the enormous creature to writhe in pain. The injury causes the dragon to enter a state of total fury, and it begins to attack everything around it with unprecedented movement. They manage to survive the chaotic assault, and Vigo shouts for his team to stand firm, since they are the strongest group in the world. After this, the scene shifts to the Silverwang Battalion's meeting room, where all the members of the group are gathered around a large table, except for Kate. Dennis then asks Vigo why he summoned this meeting, and it is then that Vigo places all the blame for their recent failure on Dennis himself, stating that if Dennis had not used his terrifying voice ability, the dragon would not have fled, and they would have been able to defeat it properly. Dennis calmly reminds Vigo that it was he who ordered him to use that specific ability, but Vigo does not care at all. He refuses to accept responsibility for his own orders. He continues to reprimand him for the outcome, and Dennis remembers that their objective was to defeat the dragon and collect its rare materials to sell. But when the dragon suddenly entered a state of frenzy, it became too dangerous to continue the battle. As most of them were already injured and on the brink of defeat, Vigo ordered Dennis to use his intimidation spell, which could frighten enemies. Dennis followed his order and managed to make the dragon flee from the battlefield. Although this decision caused the mission to become a failure, it ultimately saved everyone's lives. Dennis admits that at the time he was quite surprised by Vigo's good judgment, which was not typical of him. But now he is seeing his true nature. He realizes that the young man has not changed at all, and Vigo denies having given that order and goes even further, since he suggests that Dennis might have been sent to infiltrate his group as a spy for a rival team, wanting to tarnish the reputation of the Silverwang Battalion. He tells Dennis to leave the group, and none of the other members say anything to defend him, since they all now fear the captain. Vigo then delivers a cruel speech about how Dennis was never worthy of being on his elite team, because he is only a cook, and the Silverwang Battalion is a battalion composed only of swordsmen, priests, and mages of the highest elite. He points out that, although both have reached level 99, a simple cook like Dennis has no place among real warriors. It is then that our hero realizes it no longer makes sense to continue like this, so he tells them to do whatever they want because they are no longer his problem. He leaves the room with his head held high, leaving behind the group he served faithfully for so long. A little later, Dennis walks through the crowded streets of the capital, thinking that he will also have to say goodbye to that place. And it is then that a little girl accidentally collides with him and releases her balloon, which begins to rise while she starts to cry. Dennis quickly catches the balloon and returns it, saying that she should not let go of the things that are important to her. Meanwhile, Vigo observed from a distance as Dennis walks away and smiles coldly, while preparing to launch his true plan. Just when Dennis was about to leave the city, Kate appears to try to stop him. Although the others do not recognize Dennis's role in the group, Kate knows very well that he played a fundamental role. After all, he was in charge of all the important tasks, such as medicine, alchemy, and food preparation. Our hero then believes that others will take over his responsibilities, but Kate explains that after he joined the group, their ability to explore the most dangerous dungeons increased drastically, so much so that people now call them the strongest group in the world. She knows that the rest of the team does not realize how much Dennis supports them from the shadows, but she recognizes his true importance. Kate desperately tries to convince Dennis to return, and when she fails, she asks him to cook one last dinner for her, or to prepare some snacks for them. Dennis does not believe that this is the only thing on her mind, so Kate becomes serious and asks him if he truly plans to leave forever. Dennis then remains silent, and Kate asks what he will do with his life now. He explains that he will continue cooking. After all, that is his job. He reveals that he plans to open his own restaurant, and Kate does not want him to go, so she tries to stop him once more, saying that she was the one who found him, and that he belongs to her. Dennis is grateful that Kate invited him to the Silverwang Battalion, and thinks about how well they get along, which he believes is the reason why Vigo expelled him, since he had a romantic interest in Kate. Dennis then says goodbye to Kate and departs, even though she tries to order him to return, using her authority as sub-captain. But he does not even react, because he knows that his life as an adventurer is over, and only as an adventurer indeed, since his life as a cook is just beginning, and thus begins the prequel to Food Wars. Just kidding, everyone, let's continue. A few hours later, our hero has just arrived in a new city, where he is buying supplies to start his new restaurant. He discovers an incredible box in one of the shops that can cool anything without the need for ice. The salesman explains to him that it is called an ice box, and it is essential for every restaurant. Dennis gets very excited thinking about buying it, but then he remembers reading in his favorite book about how to open a restaurant that one should avoid unnecessary purchases. He needs to keep the investment as low as possible, so he decides not to buy the ice box for now, because he can use ice magic in his establishment. It is then that, following the recommendations of the book, he buys an abandoned property and contacts distributors in order to acquire raw materials. He ends up buying some necessary utensils, and after completing all these tasks, he thinks about how this process seems quite fun, and that he is getting closer and closer to his dream. The next piece of advice from the book is not to handle everything alone, since he will not be able to serve all the customers, and for that reason, he decides to hire an assistant. Suddenly, he notices a crowd gathered around a slave merchant who is selling a young girl. At the time, she was the daughter of a nobleman. The merchant explains that her parents were defeated in a political power struggle, and that she was exiled, which is why she ended up in this situation. The people gathered there find it hard to believe that she is actually from the nobility, because she does not look refined at all, but they think she is very cute, and that when she grows up she will be very beautiful. Dennis would like to help her, but thinks that he cannot save everyone, and if he were to get angry at every injustice that appears in the world, he would not be able to survive. But when he looks at the girl's life, he remembers his own childhood, from when he was an orphan. The slave merchant then asks for bids, starting at 300,000, and it is then that the value quickly rises to 800,000, and Dennis increases the bid to 1 million, believing that he will win. But the vendor he met before intervenes with an offer of 1.5 million, saying that the girl is very cute, so he will take her home and take very good care of her. And Dennis notes that this guy is simply a pervert, but he does not try to judge people by appearance, since he said he will take care of her. However, the crowd begins to mutter, saying that that guy is truly a pervert, and that the girl would be miserable if he took her. Our hero then realizes that he cannot allow this to happen under any circumstances, so he offers even more. The bidding war continues until it surpasses 5 million, and we see that Dennis has finally succeeded in the purchase. He takes her to his restaurant, although he feels quite frustrated because he spent almost all of his savings on buying the girl. It is then that, wanting to help her start over, he takes her to a store, buys a new dress for her, and fixes her up. Later, we see them walking together, and the girl walks very slowly. So Dennis warns that if she continues walking that way, she will get lost, since she will be far from him, and after a while, his warning becomes reality, and she gets lost in the middle of the crowd. She cannot find Dennis anywhere, and she becomes frightened by all the people around her. But suddenly, after a few minutes, Dennis appears in front of her, not being surprised that she actually got lost, so he apologizes for walking too fast. They then arrive at the restaurant, and the girl asks Dennis why he bought her. He mentions that he does not have a real reason, aside from the fact that she reminded him of something from a long time ago. He then asks for her name, and she says he can simply call her Slave, but he asks if she does not have a real name. She then asks him to call her Atriel, and he introduces himself as Dennis, and she asks what she should do, and he says that there is absolutely nothing to do, and he says that she can use the upstairs floor, or if she does not want to live there, she can leave, because now she is free. Atriel is shocked to hear this, but before she can do anything else, her stomach rumbles loudly, so our hero already begins to prepare something for both of them. He makes a wonderful dish, which fills the entire restaurant with an incredible aroma. She is quite enchanted by the delicious smell, and when Dennis finishes cooking, they sit down to eat. The girl enjoys the food very much, and it gives her so much happiness that she begins to cry. Dennis thinks that he does not know what happened to her, and that he will not ask unless she wants to tell him. Atriel then continues to eat, but he notices that she is starting to choke because of the food, so he quickly helps her. For 2 days, Atriel helps Dennis decorate the restaurant and even takes care of the cleaning, which makes Dennis quite happy. Over time, they finish preparing everything, and Dennis gives a name to his new place, calling it the Adventurer's Diner. Dennis tells Atriel that she will be their poster girl, and she practices her customer service skills before the grand opening. Dennis, for his part, believes he has everything ready, and that he is prepared for whatever the customer might demand. He claims that everyone will become obsessed with his food, and that they will become so addicted that they will eat at least 3 meals a day, every day, only at his restaurant. He hopes that the customers will pay him a lot of money, because now he is left with nothing after spending everything on the restaurant and on Atriel. But while he is lost in his thoughts, the first customer enters the restaurant, but to the surprise of both, the customer is wearing armor. Dennis quickly remembers reading in his restaurant management guide that some adventurers prefer to maintain their privacy, so he decides to respect their boundaries and creates a more comfortable atmosphere where they can enjoy their food in peace. Dennis tells Atriel to serve water to their mysterious customer. While he hands over the menu, he wonders what the customer will order, since he is prepared to cook anything. However, the customer nervously orders a small portion of rice and a glass of crystal water. He wonders if this customer is eating little, but the customer refuses with a shake of the head. Then Dennis realizes that they must have a low budget, and that is why they are ordering the cheapest item. And our protagonist feels sympathy and asks if they like spicy pork. The customer confirms, so Dennis decides to prepare it in its place. However, the knight protests, saying that they do not have enough money to pay for such an expensive dish. But Dennis asserts that he cannot serve an ordinary meal to the first customer in his restaurant. But then suddenly he realizes by the voice that the knight is actually a woman. His suspicions are confirmed when the knight takes off the helmet, revealing the face of a beautiful young woman who introduces herself as Henrietta. She explains her difficult situation, as she was recently expelled from her group of adventurers, because they believed that women are weak and only cause problems for the team. She expresses her frustration with this prejudice, and Dennis is in complete agreement with her. Henrietta mentions that she is only at level 23. However, Dennis thinks this is impressive and believes that at this level she is definitely qualified to be an adventurer. Henrietta then asks if he has ever heard of the sub-captain of the strongest group in the kingdom, the Silverwang Battalion. She is a woman who is even considered a legendary swordswoman, and Dennis says that he has indeed heard of a woman like her, but that it seems quite problematic. And Henrietta explains that she cannot join any group without having to hide her true identity, and this constant struggle consumed all of her savings. After a few minutes, Dennis serves her the dish he prepared, saying that she will feel much better after eating something, and Henrietta hesitates, asking if he is sure he will give such expensive food to her, knowing that she cannot pay. But Dennis says that she can pay when she has the money, and Henrietta takes the first bite and is surprised by the incredible flavor, as she has never eaten anything so delicious in her entire life. She finishes the bowl in just a few minutes, praising Dennis for his exceptional ability in the kitchen. Our protagonist hopes that she will become a regular customer of his restaurant, and she promises that she will be, but only after joining a group and earning some money. Dennis then wonders if he should ask his other customers if they know of a group that needs a swordswoman. Henrietta gets excited at the suggestion, and Dennis points out that it will be quite difficult to contact her if an opportunity arises. So he hopes that she stops by the restaurant once in a while, and she ends up agreeing. A few days later, we see a group of male adventurers eating at the restaurant, and they are completely impressed by the quality of the food. They also praise Atriel, congratulating Dennis on the exceptional assistant he has. They consider this food to be a good luck charm before going to the dungeon on their next mission. Thus, Dennis realizes that they are a group of adventurers, and he asks them if they are looking for a skilled swordswoman. Since he knows a very good warrior, they do not mind the gender at all, and they hope she can start working with them soon. Dennis is then surprised to find such a suitable group for Henrietta so quickly, and they explain to him that their team only lacks attack power, so this recommendation is like a gift from the heaven. But as they say, if the offer is too good to be true, one should be suspicious, and later that same day, Dennis informs Henrietta about the group he found for her, and she accepts to join immediately. which leaves him quite surprised, since he thinks she should be more careful before joining strangers. But she assures him that everything will go well, and Dennis decides to leave the final decision to her and serves the food. Henrietta gives thanks before eating, and she tells them that they will have to earn a lot of money to be able to pay him as he deserves. But Dennis reminds her not to talk with her mouth full because that is bad manners, and Henrietta then asks him what she should eat when she returns tomorrow. And he finds it funny that she actually plans to have all her meals at a restaurant, and after finishing her food, she leaves with a big smile on her face, hoping to finally earn some money. After that, our hero continues serving customers throughout the day, and feels happy with the constant flow of work. At night, two girls arrive at the restaurant, and he thinks they will be his last customers of the day. He hears them praising the restaurant, but then one of them talks about some recent rumors about a dangerous group that has been recruiting solitary adventurers, only to lead them into the depths of the dungeon and then attack them. And the criminals move carefully to different cities after committing their crimes once or twice, which makes it very difficult for the authorities to capture them. Dennis finds the news alarming and begins to worry that that might be the same group he recommended to Henrietta, and this ends up generating a great fear for her safety. And the next day, Henrietta finally meets her new group and introduces herself. The leader of the group introduces himself as Steel, a light swordsman, and the other members of the group also introduce their names and skills. Steel tells her that there is no need to be too formal with the group, since they prefer a very relaxed atmosphere. They then leave together, and as they follow the path, Henrietta asks what kind of mission they are going to perform that day. Steel explains that it is just a simple collection mission. They are going to enter the dungeon to collect some objects, and that is it. Henrietta asks what exactly they are going to collect, but Steel mentions that they will discuss the details as soon as they reach the dungeon. She thinks it was better to know the details beforehand, but does not want things to get uncomfortable or for her to seem too demanding on her first day, so she simply follows them. Soon, they enter the dungeon and she is quite at ease, and immediately shows her value by defeating several monsters that cross her path. Her teammates praise her skills, saying it is a great help to have such a strong swordswoman on the team. Henrietta feels genuinely happy that they trust her in this way, thinking it is the first time she has experienced such acceptance, and values this greatly. The group then decides to go even deeper into the dungeon, and Henrietta remains optimistic, thinking that things might go well with this team. They end up encountering more and more monsters as they advance, and she is put in charge of the entire fight, while the other members of the group simply watch. They offer words of encouragement, with her defeating every creature that crosses her path. But the constant battles begin to affect her stamina, and she starts to feel tired. And instead of suggesting a rest, her companions say that their destination is only a few steps ahead. Despite barely being able to walk well, she follows them deeper into the dungeon. Then they finally reach the destination, where Steel explains that the memory crystals found in that area are the ones they were looking for. Henrietta, completely exhausted by the journey, was overwhelmed by fatigue, so Steel orders his group's healer, Marmok, to cast a recovery spell. The healer then approaches her, and Henrietta thanks him in advance. However, instead of healing her, he casts a paralysis spell, leaving her unable to move. Henrietta then realizes something is wrong and tries to reach for her sword, but Steel kicks her hand, preventing her from defending herself. It is then that Steel says that fortunately for them, she is so stupid that they only had to praise her a little for her to lower her guard completely. The healer tells Steel that he should not call her an idiot, since thanks to her, they are going to create new memories, and Steel thinks that swordswomen are the ideal targets, because they are not as smart as sages or mages, but they are quite attractive. So Henrietta realizes she cannot stay like this and knows she needs to do something, but her body is paralyzed and refuses to obey. Steel then says that he will release her once she entertains them for an hour, but before they leave, they will leave her knocked out, so it will depend on luck whether someone rescues her or if she dies in the dungeon. Henrietta then remembers Dennis's words about being cautious when choosing a group, and thinks that if she had been alert from the start, she would have noticed all the warning signs. Henrietta desperately cries out for help, begging for someone to save her, but the criminals reassure her and say that no one is going to come rescue her in the dungeon, and after that they begin to take off her clothes while praising her body. But before they can do the unthinkable, they hear a very strange noise that resonates through the dungeon. They wonder if it could be another group, and that would complicate things a lot for them. So Steel orders one of his men to investigate the source of the sound. But before he can do that, the miserable man goes flying against the dungeon wall due to a very strong attack. Soon, they notice that it seems to be a type of monster before them, but in reality, it is a man with a leather mask. Steele orders Marmok to cast a search spell to find the intruder's weakness. But when he tries to evaluate him, the spell fails completely, and Marmok realizes that there is an enormous difference between their levels, which means they do not have the slightest chance against him. Steele thinks that they would not descend this far into the dungeon, so a monster of such power could not exist in the upper levels. But before he can process any more of this information, the masked man turns his knives to the dull side and attacks him directly, knocking him out of combat with a single devastating blow. The other members of the group try to flee in terror, but the masked man pursues them relentlessly, knocking them down one by one with precise attacks. Henrietta watches in amazement, wondering who that person could be, and notes that his movements are like those of a very skilled chef handling kitchen knives. But she is very exhausted, so she loses consciousness. The next day, Henrietta arrives at Dennis's restaurant and explains everything that happened to her. Henrietta mentions that when she regained consciousness, she was lying safely in the Adventurers Guild, and she could not thank the mysterious man who saved her. Furthermore, the members of the group who harassed her were found unconscious and tied with ropes outside the dungeon. The guild investigated the incident and discovered that in reality, this group was a well-known criminal gang, and that all of them were charged with different crimes. Henrietta reflects that the whole experience seems to have been a dream, and recognizes that this incident taught her the importance of being careful when choosing a group. Our hero assumes part of the blame, as he believes it is also his responsibility, since he was the one who recommended the group without investigating their history. Henrietta does not blame him at all and recognizes his concern for her well-being, but her stomach begins to growl with hunger. So Dennis asks what she would like to eat. She mentions that she still has no money, but Dennis says that she can order anything from the menu. Feeling brave, she asks for the most expensive steak available, which surprises Dennis quite a bit. So she feels guilty and asks him to prepare the cheapest one instead. But Dennis tells her that an order cannot be cancelled once it is made, and he also invites Atriel to have dinner with her. Suddenly, the two girls from before arrive at the restaurant, and Dennis asks them to serve themselves water, since Atriel is having dinner at that moment. They understand and accept the request, while Dennis begins to prepare the expensive steak that Henrietta had ordered. After finishing the cooking, he serves the perfectly prepared steak to Henrietta and Atriel. Both express their joy because the flavor is delicious. Then the two girls ask Dennis why he did not open the restaurant yesterday, mentioning that it is not good for regular customers like them for the place to close 2 days in a row without prior notice. Dennis explains that he had something important to resolve, and Henrietta finds all of this a bit suspicious. She observes him closely, studying his physique and his movements more carefully, and suddenly, she realizes that he is the same person who saved her in the dungeon. But before she can say anything else or confront him about it, another customer arrives at the restaurant, interrupting the moment, and Dennis receives him with a warm welcome. A while later, Henrietta is talking to Dennis, but she feels that he is not truly listening, which bothers her. Then Dennis asks her what she wishes to order, and she asks for the magic ramen. While cooking, he suddenly mentions his previous concern about whether she should hide her gender to venture out. Henrietta is surprised that he actually paid attention to her, and Dennis tells her to do what she feels is right, because, in the end, she is appearing as herself, and that is what makes her special. And Dennis then serves her food. But his words seem to leave a profound impact, and without saying much, she gets up and goes to another room, surprising everyone. And there, she reflects on how people who make mistakes often end up being so afraid of failing once more that they lose sight of who they truly are. But instead of hiding behind fear, she prefers to be true to herself. And Henrietta soon returns in her usual clothes, and Atriel says that she looks very beautiful. Henrietta sits down once more at the table and begins to enjoy her delicious food, and she then tells Dennis that his words really made her reflect, and believes that the advice of a chef with experience carries special weight. Dennis is happy to hear this, but asks Henrietta if she is truly serious about finding a new group. After all, she has been having all her meals at his restaurant and has not yet made even the first payment. Henrietta admits somewhat nervously that she has been trying to find a group, but has had no luck so far, and she is also surprised that he is keeping track of everything she owes. She thought she did not need to pay for that, but Dennis reminds her that only the first meal was free and that she has to pay for the others. Atriel also feels that Dennis is being a bit mean, but just at that moment they are interrupted by the sudden arrival of a customer. He takes a seat and begins to look at the menu, while Dennis tries to guess if it is a boy or a girl. When Dennis asks if he already knows what he is going to order, the customer responds by asking what is good on that menu, and Dennis responds, with confidence, that everything is excellent. The young man then points out that that does not help much, since it is natural for Dennis to like his own food. It is then that Dennis suggests a dish called Vitara Katsuden, but the customer is not in the mood to eat something with rice. Henrietta then also joins the conversation, recommending the pasta, since personally it seems very appetizing, but he does not want anything too heavy, so she suggests another dish, but he is not in the mood for that, and ends up frustrating Dennis quite a bit, who is already losing his patience. Henrietta quickly stops Dennis, saying that he is just a teenager, and that he generally has trouble making decisions. It is then that she approaches the boy and suggests that he order fried rice, and seeing how kind she is, the boy cannot resist and decides to give it a chance. Dennis quickly prepares the dish, using his level 999 skills. When the customer takes the first bite, his expression makes it clear how much he is enjoying it, and Dennis observes closely while he eats, and asks if something is wrong, and the boy seems confused. So Dennis explains that he heard him sigh before, and thought that perhaps he wanted to talk to someone. The customer says that there is nothing in particular that he wants to tell, and Dennis respects, saying that it is fine if he does not want to share. But then, suddenly, the young man begins to speak about his problem. He says that his problem is that everyone around him is too weak, which leaves them shocked. Clearly, he has no filter at all, and Dennis only pretends to agree, but the boy asks if he wants to hear more. Although Dennis is not very interested, the young man continues. He says that the people around him have a very limited mindset. They only care about completing the mission in front of them and earning some money, without a mission to improve or to become a high-level group. Dennis looks at poor Henrietta and thinks that the poor girl cannot even earn money, much less have aspirations as high as those of that boy. But she feels that he is slighting her, and the boy declares that he refuses to join groups that have no motivation, since he believes that being an adventurer is not just about going to safe zones and fighting weak monsters. For him, it is about exploring the unknown. But when he shared this philosophy, he was expelled from his previous group. Dennis then wonders if his restaurant is somehow emitting pheromones that attract expelled people, and the customer continues explaining his ideas, saying that he does not care about staying with small-minded people, because one day he will join the Silverwang Battalion as the strongest maid. Dennis advises him to be careful not to get so excited that he ends up being alone. After all, adventurers are only adventurers thanks to their groups. The boy responds that he will consider joining a group, but that he can only follow his own pace. Then he pays for his food, telling Dennis to keep the change. But Dennis notes that this scoundrel paid exactly what the dish cost, and upon leaving, he introduces himself as Vivian Strange and says that he will soon return to try the fried rice with shrimp. A few days later, Vivian returns to the restaurant and waits for them to prepare his order, and he announces that he has found a new group, and that they are the strongest group in the area, called Night Snow. Dennis congratulates him, and Vivian speaks with confidence that someone like him is always being requested for high-level groups. Our hero asks about the levels of his companions, since before Vivian was very insistent on saying that he would only work with strong members. But now I think he has another opinion, since he said that levels can come later. As long as someone has the motivation to improve, he has no problem with it. Vivian asserts that he possesses many advanced skills that only need to be put into practice, and believes that the group chose him for his future potential. Dennis is happy for him, and Vivian adds that very soon he will be joining the Silverwang Battalion. Dennis serves his fried rice with shrimp, and while Vivian eats it, he wonders if they will give him a legendary nickname once he joins the Silverwang. Dennis remembers that he used to have a legendary nickname related to fried rice, and he thinks that Vivian really is a bit egocentric, but admits that wanting to surpass oneself is not a bad thing. He thinks that the young man has great potential to become a great adventurer if he can find a group that trains him well. And our hero asks about his first job, and Vivian explains that it will be tomorrow. They will go to the 5th floor of the dungeon to collect some rare minerals. Dennis uses his appraisal skill to check his level, and sees that he is only at level 17, which is quite impressive for his age, to tell the truth. But he knows that normally level 30 or more is required for that place. Concerned about Vivian's safety, Dennis politely asks if that is not too deep for him, but Vivian responds that he will be fine, since the elite members of his group promise to give full support. Dennis says that although Vivian claims to have advanced skills, he probably only read about them in books and thinks he can use them. He explains that a person's level is the quantity of the number and the quality of the skills they have acquired. Dennis adds that base statistics increase with each level, because skills become more precise and are almost always active. He thinks that if Vivian truly acquired multiple advanced skills, it is strange his level has not increased as a result. Vivian feels that his group believes in his abilities, but Dennis still advises him to be careful, and Vivian does not take him seriously, saying that Dennis probably knows nothing about dungeons, since, according to him, he certainly has never been in one, and here he is quite mistaken. Little does he know. Our hero then remembers that the last time he entered a dungeon he went down to the 37th floor, and thinks that Vivian will be fine if he really goes with a high-level group. When Vivian leaves, he says that he will try the fried rice with crab next time, and on the following day Dennis and Atriel are shopping, and Dennis thinks that by that time Vivian must have already reached the 5th floor. He wonders if he should have stopped her, and Atriel hopes that Vivian might be safe. Suddenly, they hear a group of adventurers talking about Vivian and whether she is alright. One of them says it is too late to worry now, but admits it was quite cruel of them to send her to the 5th floor alone, to see if she could actually make it back on her own. And the other says that this is simply his way of proving that new recruits are worthy of joining them. Upon hearing this, Dennis grabs them immediately and pulls them aside, saying he wants to talk. They ask if he realizes they are members of the Night Snow group, so they lunge at him, but Dennis defeats them easily. He tells Atriel they will have to close the restaurant for the day, and she understands he is going to look for Vivian, so she simply asks him to be careful. And meanwhile, poor Vivian is running from some goblins inside the dungeon. She remembers how the members of her group abandoned her, saying she needs to find her own way back. And while running blindly to leave the dungeon, she is suddenly captured by some entanglements. And while she tries to free herself, she realizes they are bound by a spell, so she will need magic to break it. However, when she tries to use her spell, her mind goes blank, since she never practiced those spells she only read about in books. She thought she had memorized them all, but now she is terrified, as the goblins might find her and stab her to death. At that moment, she feels someone approaching, and a girl suddenly appears, helping her hide in a nearby cave. Vivian gives thanks for being saved, and says it was thanks to the steps she taught to break the spell that she managed to survive. She is impressed that the girl knows such ancient magic, and admits she would not be alive if it were not for her. The girl says it is too early to feel safe, because first they need to find a way to escape. She then introduces herself as Vivian and asks for her name. The girl says her name is Cynthia, and she asks if she just got lost there. Cynthia says her group left her behind after she fell into the same trap as her, and Vivian finds this horrible of them. But she says it is alright, since she was never good at anything. She always caused problems in everything she tried, and Cynthia apologizes, thinking she might end up feeling attacked. Cynthia suggests waiting to see if Vivian's group will return to rescue them, and Vivian tells her she is in the same situation, because no one will come to rescue her. She accepts that she was very selfish and that she never cared about others, which is why she fought with the members of her group. And Vivian thinks she has a terrible personality. But Cynthia insists that is not true. Vivian thinks she knows nothing about Cynthia, while she responds that she also knows nothing about her. This makes Vivian realize she had never spoken to a stranger in that way, and it makes her feel a little better. Cynthia is happy to hear this, but unfortunately, the goblins have returned, looking for Vivian everywhere. She realizes she does not have many options, so she decides to act on her own, and as a mage, she distracts all the goblins so that she can escape. Cynthia refuses, saying it makes no sense if she does not survive. But Vivian says she would already be dead if it were not for Cynthia. Vivian says it is the first time she has felt this way, since she has always lived selfishly. She tells Cynthia to run while she draws the attention of the goblins, while she lunges and tries to stop her. But she cannot reach her in time, and she jumps in front of the goblins, thinking it is fine to die as long as Cynthia can live. She then uses her palm spell to hold back the goblins, but they break it easily and jump on her to kill her. But suddenly Dennis appears and arrives using his skills to create a large barrier of rocks that protects them. Seeing his face covered with a paper bag, Vivian thinks he is some kind of monster and panics, but Dennis tries to calm her. Vivian ends up recognizing his voice, and Dennis takes off his mask, saying it makes no sense to keep wearing it. He reprimands Vivian for lunging so recklessly in front of the goblins and says they have to get out of there quickly. But Vivian insists they have to save the girl. Vivian wonders if the girl has already escaped, but Dennis says he did not see anyone in his path. However, Vivian thinks she might still be in the cave. Dennis decides to check, but all he finds is Cynthia's skeleton, leaving Vivian in a state of shock. A little later, they inquire about her at the guild and discover she was a 16-year-old mage. She had become separated from her group on the 5th floor 3 years ago, and after that, Dennis and Vivian lay her remains to rest in peace. They build a grave for her, and our hero mentions hearing that sometimes the spirits of adventurers who died in dungeons end up saving those who still live. And Vivian tells Cynthia that she will visit her again and promises to become the most powerful mage, so that she will be capable of saving girls like her in the future. As they leave, Dennis tries to improve her mood by offering some fried rice, and he invites Vivian to accompany him, which she accepts with pleasure. And Dennis asks her not to be so depressed, saying that Cynthia will not be able to rest in peace that way. Vivian asks him to at least let her be sad for a while, but suddenly she feels Cynthia's spirit saying goodbye to her and thinks that she is a true mage, since she continued living even after her death. The day before, a man shouts at Vashel, demanding to know when she would finally deliver the report that was supposed to be done. She has no answer, so she bows her head and apologizes. But that is not enough for him. He says that the only thing she knows how to do is apologize, while the others begin to laugh, and she apologizes even for that. And Vashel tries to explain to him that the mission reward numbers do not add up. But her boss strikes her on the head with a pile of papers and orders her to redo everything. He asks if she is truly level 32. And because of this, Vashel ends up working late into the night while the others went home. When she checks the documents, she realizes that the numbers are completely wrong, which explains why the calculations did not match. It turns out it is her superior who makes these careless mistakes, but she is the one who has to fix them. Furthermore, she has to wake up at 3 in the morning for another mission, and has not eaten anything all day. So the hunger begins to become unbearable. She doubts a restaurant would still be open at that hour, but she is so hungry that she decides to take a risk and see if the new place that just opened in town is still running. When she finally arrives, she sees that Atriel is closing up, which breaks her heart, but Atriel notices her distress and invites her inside. Dennis is surprised to see a customer after closing, but with the help of Henrietta and Vivian, Atriel manages to convince her master to cook one last meal for her. Dennis finally accepts, and after seeing the menu, Vashel orders the special of the day. Meanwhile, Vivian talks to Henrietta about cutting her hair, and Vashel notes how happy everyone seems together, and assumes they must be regular customers of the restaurant. She reflects on how she hardly sleeps and has no friends, but seeing them so happy makes her think she should start visiting pleasant places like this. After a while, Dennis brings her food, and when Vashel takes the first bite, she is marveled by how delicious it is. She falls in love with the restaurant instantly, and while she is excited about her dish, Henrietta intervenes with several suggestions about what she should try next. Vivian jokes with Henrietta that she has already tried everything on the menu, and Henrietta proudly introduces herself as the restaurant's first customer. Dennis quickly corrects her, saying she cannot call herself a customer since she has never paid anything. He tells her to get a job first, but Henrietta reminds him that Vivian is also unemployed, and Dennis responds that although Vivian is between jobs, at least she pays for her meals. Vivian responds that she has some savings, and Henrietta jokes, calling her a traitor. And hearing her friends argue, Vashel lets out a laugh, and Dennis apologizes for the uproar, but they soon notice that she has started to cry, leaving everyone surprised. Vashel reflects on how much joy there is in life, but does not understand why hers seems so monotonous and difficult. She is always stuck at work, no one values her effort, and every morning she wakes up with the feeling of not wanting to go on. And in a flashback, when she was younger, people saw Vashel as a promising mage. Her entire village believed in her potential and gathered resources to support her in her studies in the big city. With the hope that she would become a famous mage, everything started very well, and she advanced grade by grade and eventually graduated. So the director offered her a job as a teacher at the school. Vashel had advanced thanks to her notable skills and even received offers for a position as a faculty member. However, she rejected that offer because she wanted to become an adventurer and earn a lot of money to support her family in the village. Vashel ends up leaving the restaurant, and everyone feels deeply saddened by her situation. Henrietta reveals that she is part of the Night Snow group, the same group that left her to die in the dungeon. She mentions that she only saw her once, but that she left a very strong impression on her mind, and the others quickly tell Dennis to do something. But he refuses, saying he is just the cook, and the only thing he can do is feed people with the best he can offer. He believes that the only person who can truly help Vashel is herself. The next day at 3 in the morning, the alarm rings, but she is so exhausted that she does not want to wake up. Half asleep, she turns it off and goes back to sleep. And a few hours later, she finally wakes up and realizes she is very late. She quickly grabs her things and runs to meet her group, who are quite furious with her for being so irresponsible. They soon leave for their morning mission in the dungeon, but after a while, they encounter a werewolf, which knocks down one of the group members. Vashel quickly reacts and saves him with her wind magic, but when she goes to see how he is, he pushes her away with a look of contempt. After the mission, Vashel feels deeply discouraged, and while wandering the city streets, she remembers how her companions do not appreciate her help. They said it was part of the plan to attract more monsters and accused her of interfering. They said cruel things, assuring her that they would be better off if she were not there. Henrietta and Vivian are walking through the streets while talking about food, and suddenly they notice that Vashel seems visibly depressed. Concerned, they decide to follow her, and soon they arrive at a tower, and there they see Vashel standing on the edge. They realize the situation is serious, and just as Vashel jumps, Henrietta jumps after her and catches her. Vivian quickly uses her palm spell to create a huge cushion, which ensures they land safely. Meanwhile, at the restaurant, Atriel comes out of the bathroom complaining that there is no towel, and Dennis realizes she is completely naked, dripping water all over the floor, which makes him quite uncomfortable, and he asks Atriel to get dressed, but she refuses, saying she will not wear clothes without drying off first. Just at that moment, Vivian arrives with the others, and as soon as she sees Atriel like that, she closes her eyes quickly. Dennis is surprised to see they are carrying the unconscious Vashel, and quickly takes her inside. He believes she is suffering from a severe emotional disorder, explaining that when a sensitive person keeps everything inside, eventually it accumulates so much that it becomes unbearable, and they try to destroy themselves. Vivian cannot help making a joke, saying that Henrietta would never suffer from something like that. Since she is so spontaneous and never takes things seriously, she would never do something of the sort. Dennis is then happy to see they are well, and Henrietta asks how they can help Vashel. Dennis explains that the only real remedy is plenty of rest, and Vivian doubts that will happen. After all, Vashel is part of the night's snow. Then Dennis promises to speak with her group, and that same night, he receives the members at his restaurant. Their leader, Captain Hooper, apologizes for the trouble caused by one of his group members, and Dennis also apologizes, mentioning that he had to knock down 2 of his companions the other day as a precaution regarding Vivian. Hooper lets it slide and says he heard the food there is exceptional, and our hero quickly realizes that this man will not be easily convinced. Using his appraisal skill, he sees that Hooper is actually level 51 and is well above average for an adventurer. Dennis explains that Vashel is safe and resting for now, but that she is in no condition to continue working with the group. He suggests that she be released so that she can recover properly. However, Hooper refuses, saying she signed a contract with them. Then he takes out Vashel's contract and shows it to Dennis. And upon examining the contract, Dennis says it is clear they placed the entire burden of the group on Vashel's shoulders, and he notices they are trying to squeeze every bit of utility out of her, which seems quite inhuman. But Hooper does not care about the criticism. Dennis loses his composure and speaks directly, saying they are nothing but a bunch of cruel scammers. And this infuriates Hooper, who crumples the contract with his hand. He tells Dennis that they are the strongest group in the city, so basically that is their territory, and they dictate the rules. Meanwhile, Vashel wakes up feeling miserable and wondering why they did not let her die. She thinks everything would be better if she were not there, and Atriel tells her that she also wanted to do the same thing once, after being banished and sold as a slave. But everything changed when Dennis entered her life and took her to the restaurant, where he gave her hope. She thinks there is still happiness waiting for her and suggests that she eat something delicious, and if after that Vashel still wants to die, then perhaps there is nothing more that anyone can do. In any case, Atriel says she will respect her decision, but hopes she chooses to live. And outside the room, Dennis asks Hopper if he thinks he is some kind of king. Hooper has an indifferent posture and says it is more or less exactly like that. And he explains that in all of Dungeon City, the strongest group is the one with real power, since no one else can compete with them. He mentions the Silverwang Battalion as a perfect example, and Dennis quickly points out that Hopper's group is nothing like them. Hooper disagrees, saying they are basically the same, except that instead of serving royalty and nobles, the influence of Night Snow is limited to that small town, and he further adds that Dennis has a nice place, but if he were to set it on fire, no one would stop him. Then Dennis asks if Hopper is threatening him, and just when things are getting serious, Kate arrives. Excited to see Dennis after so long, she praises his restaurant, and Dennis tries to ask her to return later, as he is in the middle of something important. But Kate refuses, as she came from the capital and does not plan to leave. Hooper cannot help but notice the crimson armor, the red gemstones, and the radiant hair, and most importantly, the emblem on her coat, and he realizes that she is the sub-captain of the Silverwang Battalion, and he wonders what her relationship is with Dennis, since they seem quite close. After Kate sits down and waits in line, Dennis asks Hopper if there is any other way to remove Vashel from his group, since he does not want to fight them. Kate immediately interrupts again, hugging Vivian tightly because she thinks the girl is very cute, but Dennis quickly explains to her that Vivian is actually a boy. And I am sure you did not expect that one, right? Neither did I. Vivian asks if she is truly the sub-captain of the Silverwang Battalion, and Kate confirms it. And when questioned about her relationship with Dennis, Kate reveals that he used to be part of the Silverwang Battalion and that they were companions, leaving everyone in the restaurant in shock. Hopper's eyes open wide as he realizes it is not a good idea to be an enemy of the Silverwang Battalion. His subordinate asks what they should do, so Hopper hands him the contract and orders him to destroy it immediately. He officially releases Vashel from the group and leaves the premises quickly, wishing her a speedy recovery. Kate thinks Hopper was quite hostile and cannot believe he was bothering her dear Dennis, so she wants to go after him to fight. But Dennis stops her and says it is not a good idea, and Kate asks if she should expel Hopper from the country. Dennis admits she probably could do that, but asks her not to be so impulsive, and Kate grumbles, saying that Dennis can be very annoying sometimes, but that is something she likes about him too. And our hero already changes the subject and asks Kate what she wants to eat. But at that very moment, Atriel arrives with Vashel, saying she is her new friend, and Kate decides to order the same as them. Dennis quickly prepares a delicious meal for the group, and when he finishes cooking, he serves the food, and Kate begins to eat with great enthusiasm, excited to taste her old friend's food after so long. Vashel notes the confidence with which Kate eats, and Dennis encourages her to start too. Before the food gets cold, she takes the first bite and thanks him for preparing such a delicious meal once again. After both finish eating, all the guests observe them, sharing the same admiration for Dennis's exceptional culinary skills. And after returning from Dennis's restaurant, Kate goes back to her Silverwang Battalion headquarters. There she notices that her companions are talking about Vigo, and how they have not achieved much progress in their recent missions, and while she listens to everything, she accidentally collides with him. Vigo tells her to get out of the way and asks Kate about her recent visit to Dennis, as he heard about it from one of his sources. As they say out there, the walls everywhere have ears, so one has to be careful. Kate then explains that she missed his food, and that is why she decided to visit him. She remembers how happy she felt enjoying the meal, so much so that she even invited him to return to the group, since the battalion is having difficulty without the rigorous chef. However, Dennis refused the offer, saying he was just the cook and that he had no interest in returning to his adventurer lifestyle. Kate asks for Vigo to convince Dennis to return to the team, but he refuses and orders her to stay completely away from Dennis. In the meantime, at his restaurant, Dennis is full of customers, as everyone fell in love with his food, which makes them always return. While Dennis prepares the dishes, Aitlier serves the food and takes the orders, and Vivian and Henrietta are also delighted to see their favorite restaurant become so popular. Both think that Dennis truly deserves this success, and Bat-Kun brings water to Vivian, surprising the boy. She thanks him for having visited her when she was sick, and mentions that now she also works at the restaurant. Bat-Kun explains that, just like Aitlier, she now lives there as well. Vivian is happy to see her well, but reminds her that one should not overdo it at work. However, Bat-Kun feels that she cannot sit idly by, so keeping herself busy seems to be the best thing at this moment. She also mentions that Aitlier made everything very easy to learn. Despite being younger, Aitlier is quite superior at work, so she is a fine teacher. Dennis watches them working together and thinks that they form a great team, and our hero personally serves the food to Vivian and Henrietta. And as soon as they take the first bite, Henrietta begins to praise the meal with enthusiasm, and she finally understands why the restaurant has become so crowded lately. She feels quite proud to be considered a regular customer. However, Dennis quickly corrects her, mentioning that she is not actually a regular customer, but rather a freeloader. Bat-Kun and Vivian are surprised to learn that Henrietta has paid nothing to Dennis, and she explains that earning money is not exactly easy for someone like her. And Dennis says he understands, but warns that if this continues for too long, it will not end well for her, which visibly frightens her quite a bit. To lighten the mood, Vivian changes the subject and asks if it is not difficult to serve so many customers at the same time, and Dennis takes the opportunity to praise Aitlier for her impeccable way of serving and keeping everything in order. Vivian notes that she seems especially happy lately, and quietly asks if something special happened. Suddenly, Dennis freezes in the middle of the conversation and accidentally drops a cup on the floor. He quickly tells Vivian to visit the restaurant on his next day off, while Henrietta tries to show her usefulness by offering help. But Dennis ignores her completely. Henrietta, discouraged, begins to think about how lately nothing seems to be going well for her. The poor girl does not even have money to stay at an inn with hot water, and it has been a long time since she visited the public baths. She knows she desperately needs to pay Dennis, but suddenly she begins to wonder if Dennis and Vivian are speaking ill of her behind her back. She fears that Dennis is even trying to ban her entry into the restaurant permanently, and a few days later, Vivian finally finds time to visit Dennis during his break. Dennis confesses that he thinks Aitlier might have a boyfriend now, and he explains that he has been giving her a weekly allowance and suspects she is spending it on him. Vivian suggests that instead of speculating and worrying, Dennis could simply ask her directly, but he admits that he does not have the courage to ask such a personal question, since he does not have much experience in the matter. He adds that if she really has a boyfriend, the young man should at least come to meet him and bring a respectful gift. Our hero also declares that he will not accept anyone below level 80 as Aitlier's boyfriend, and Vivian thinks he is being too protective, especially considering that she is not even his real daughter, and Aitlier overhears the conversation from the other room and wonders what they are talking about. Vivian quickly takes control of the situation in her mind, saying that he was asking Dennis to teach him how to cook, and our hero gives a thumbs up for saving him. But Aitlier also intervenes, saying that she would also like to learn how to cook. Dennis then takes both to the kitchen and begins to teach them how to prepare the famous katsudon. He explains that the way the onions are cut can greatly affect the flavor of the dish, and both begin to cry because of the onions. But Dennis only pays attention to Aitlier, completely ignoring poor Vivian, who begins to feel excluded. While helping her with her technique, Dennis fondly remembers how his mother taught him to cook for years, and how she strongly insisted that he learn without depending on magic. It is then that Aitlier accidentally drops pieces of eggshells onto the tray, so Dennis shows her how to crack an egg correctly and continues teaching patiently, while continuing to ignore poor Vivian, telling him to just carry on without even looking at him each time he asks a question. After working for a while, they finally finish the dish, and as they place it into the serving bowl, the city bell is heard ringing in the distance. Suddenly, Aitlier stands up and runs out, saying she has something important to do, leaving Dennis and Vivian confused. Bat-Kun arrives at that moment, and Dennis asks her to eat the food they prepared, while also handing her a list of essential supplies they must buy for the restaurant. However, she points out that it might be too much to carry alone. Luckily, Henrietta appears just then, and Dennis asks her to accompany Bat-Kun and help with the shopping. Henrietta is delighted, thinking this could be her opportunity to finally prove her usefulness. Dennis runs off with Vivian, telling the girls to enjoy the food. A while later, they find Aitlier at the market, talking happily with an elderly lady. Vivian feels uncomfortable and says they should not be spying on Aitlier like that, but Dennis tells him to be quiet. He sees himself as her guardian and believes it is his responsibility to look after the girl. Once again, Vivian asks why he does not speak directly to her about his concerns. Dennis admits he simply cannot do it, and at that moment, Vivian thinks Dennis is essentially acting like a stalker. Our hero ignores Vivian's criticism, and when he sees Aitlier talking to a boy, he begins to get angry. Vivian suggests they could just be friends, but then the boy leads her into a jewelry store, which infuriates Dennis even further. He thinks she is still too young to get married and is convinced the boy is buying her an engagement ring. When the shop door closes, Dennis becomes even more anxious, so Vivian comes up with a plan to spy on them more effectively. Meanwhile, the girls are shopping, and Bat-Kun notices that Henrietta looks a bit sad and asks if she is alright. Henrietta explains she is worried because she has been unable to pay any part of her debt to Dennis. Bat-Kun is surprised, since Henrietta is constantly going out on missions and should be able to pay at least part of what she owes. Henrietta then explains that, besides the high maintenance cost of her equipment like her armor, she is constantly injured and ends up spending all her money on healing potions just to recover. It is extremely difficult for her to survive on such a limited income, and she feels that the more she works, the less money she has. Henrietta wants to find a way to compensate Dennis for everything he has done for her. but has no idea how she will achieve it. Her sincere determination to pay him demonstrated genuine feelings, which was the most important thing. Suddenly, some people hear about how the captain of the Night Mist group was humiliated by Dennis, and there are rumors that Dennis could be a member of the Silver Wings. People hope the Night Mist group does not try to take revenge on the chef, which worries both girls, who look on with real concern for Dennis's safety. In the meantime, Vivian returns with a megaphone from a nearby shop, but Dennis does not understand why they would need something like that. Vivian reveals to him that it is actually a magic item normally used for speeches and plays. The wind magic it possesses allows sound to travel impressive distances. Our hero does not quite understand how this will help them in the current situation since they do not want to speak out loud, and Vivian mentions they can use it in reverse. He then applies his magic and places it against the wall in the opposite direction so they can more clearly hear the sounds from inside the shop. Soon they capture Aetler's voice from within, but they become seriously worried when she says it is something beautiful, and that she will treasure it for the rest of her life. Dennis completely loses his composure upon hearing Aetler say something so romantic. But right at that moment, a thief steals a woman's bag and runs right in front of them. Dennis quickly realizes the situation and tells Vivian to hold on tight because they are going to chase him. The thief feels quite confident in escaping, knowing the old lady had a lot of money and thinking no one could catch him because he is level 30. But his confidence is totally shattered. He is not that fast, and Dennis begins to close the distance without using any kind of reinforcement magic. Vivian is marveled by Dennis's incredible natural speed and wonders if all members of the Silver Wings are that fast. It is then that the thief decides to use his wind spell to jump across the rooftops, desperately trying to lose Dennis. But the latter takes the pursuit seriously and asks Vivian if he can use any magic to help them keep up the pace. And Vivian casts the palm spell, and Dennis uses it to propel himself high into the air. In this way, he manages to reach the rooftops, which allows them to continue the pursuit. Vivian continues casting spells to help them maintain the thief's impressive pace, and when they are about to catch him, the man uses his advanced wind spell to escape, leaving them frustrated. From a distance, the thief mocks Dennis, which infuriates him even further. Determined to catch him no matter what happens now, he tells Vivian to ensure they land safely while he prepares for a great leap. Suddenly, they see Henrietta and Bat-Kun on the street below, just as the thief runs in front of them. Dennis screams to stop him, and right when the thief thinks he has finally escaped, Henrietta delivers a direct blow that knocks him out of combat. Everyone is impressed, including Dennis, who feels very proud of her quick decision and reaction. Henrietta is overflowing with joy upon hearing his praise, especially because she was worried that he had been upset with her before. She adds that she really wanted to find a way to repay his kindness, and after everything is resolved, Dennis and the girls return to the restaurant, where he recounts his suspicion that Aetler had found a boyfriend. Bat-Kun mentions that Henrietta was truly worried that he might ban her from entering the restaurant, but Dennis guarantees that he would never kick out someone who appreciates his food so much. However, he adds that this policy only applies for now, and that he could change his mind if she continued to take advantage of him forever. After a while, Aetler finally returns to the restaurant, and everything goes completely silent, since they were gossiping about her private life only a few minutes ago. She goes directly to Dennis and hands him a box, saying it is a gift for him, and when Dennis opens it, he finds a bracelet inside. Aetler then explains that she had been wanting to give him this gift for weeks. She had it specially made at a jewelry store and added that she chose it because it has the same beautiful color as his eyes. Vivian realizes that the young man was merely a shop employee, and Bat-Kun laughs, saying that Dennis worried for nothing. Curious, Aetler asks what they were talking about so seriously. Then Henrietta explains that Dennis was convinced she had a boyfriend, but before she could finish the sentence, Dennis threatens to ban her from the restaurant. Henrietta realizes she may have spoken too much and quickly promises that one day she will also buy a gift for Dennis. But Vivian teases her, saying she should focus on paying her tab first. Aetler asks Dennis to put the bracelet on immediately, and he does so, feeling genuinely moved by such a thoughtful gift. Seeing how happy he looks, Aetler gets excited and, wanting to show her affection, hugs him gently by the leg, since she is too small to reach any higher. Meanwhile, Vigo heads to a massive mansion, and inside he greets the Count, saying it has been a long time since they last saw each other. The next day, when all the regular customers of the restaurant finally leave, Dennis feels exhausted from all the work in the kitchen and asks Aetler to clean the outside. Just as she was about to do so, a man suddenly enters, and Dennis says they have already closed for the day, but the stranger begins to cry upon seeing Aetlier and Bose before her. Henrietta wonders if he might be some kind of pervert and considers cutting him to pieces, but Vivian tells her not to jump to conclusions since they do not know the whole story. Dennis, also surprised by what happened, wonders who this guy is. The man then introduces himself as the head mage named Stevens. He is a servant of Lady Aetlier Werchstate. Dennis and Henrietta do not recognize the name, but Vivian and Bockel are marveled to hear it. Dennis asks if they know anything about him, and Vivian asks how he can be so uninformed. This ends up making our hero embarrassed, as it is the first time Vivian knows something he has no idea about. Bockel explains that the Werchstate House is the leader of the greatest family of mages in the kingdom, basically the highest lineage among all mages. While Dennis serves Stevens a drink, the man dries his tears, thinking that Aetlier is working as a waitress in such a filthy restaurant. Dennis wonders if he can kick him out, since he finds him annoying, and Vivian agrees that the man is quite difficult to deal with, but thinks he should at least be heard. Stevens introduces himself properly, and says he wanted to take Lady Aetlier at the request of the royal court, which leaves Dennis quite confused. Then Stevens reveals to Aetlier that she was exiled by her father's brother, Lord Joseph, because she was accused of not having Werchstate blood, but he guarantees that he found his will, and according to what it says, she is the legitimate owner of the Werchstate house, inheriting all its wealth and power. Stevens adds that the crown has granted her a new hearing regarding Lady Aetlier's legitimacy, and therefore he wants to take her to the Joseph house immediately. He believes she must reveal Joseph's betrayal and destroy him so that she can become the official heir of the Werchstate house. Aetlier politely rejects him, leaving Dennis intrigued by her reasoning. She remembers the fear she always felt among people and clings to his leg once again. Stevens insists, saying that she is not destined to work in a common restaurant that looks like a filthy kennel, and Dennis did not like that comment at all. Stevens asks Dennis to hand over the girl, reminding Aetlier of the enormous difference in status that exists between them. When he sees that she does not feel comfortable, Dennis asks if she truly does not want to go, and she confirms, saying she does not. However, he tells her that this is important for her future and is not something she can ignore. Sooner or later, she will have to face it, and Dennis believes it is best to do it now. It is then that Aetlier finally accepts, on the condition that he goes with her. A short time later, Vivian prepares himself while the girls guarantee to Dennis that they will take care of the place during his absence. Henrietta then becomes sad because she will not be able to enjoy his delicious food for a while, but Dennis calms her down, saying it will only be a few days. Soon, Aetlier arrives, and everyone is impressed to see her so dressed up. Even so, she is very nervous, saying that everything will end quickly, and they will return as soon as possible. She moans that she does not want to go to the royal capital anymore, but she does so because Dennis said it was important. Aetlier continues murmuring about her fears, and Dennis notes that it is the longest sentence she has said in the whole month. He gives her a gentle pat on the head and calms her, saying he will be by her side. Just at that moment, Stevens arrives with the carriage. Although he addresses Aetlier with respect, he calls the others commoners, which bothers Dennis quite a bit and makes him wonder if they could do something about this annoying butler. Vivian, however, comments that he is not wrong. Their status is inferior to Aetlier's. After a long journey, they finally arrive at the capital. Vivian is marveled by the view, but Dennis tells him not to get so excited, or people will think he is a peasant. Vivian does not mind, and meanwhile, Dennis feels nostalgia as he remembers how he once thought he would never return to this city. Soon, Vivian calls him, pointing to Black's restaurant, the most popular in the capital. Dennis considers visiting it after greeting the owner but changes his mind, still lacking the confidence to face him. Upon arriving at their destination, they are received by a legal official named Stabbage. He will be in charge of the delivery, and Dennis introduces himself as Aetlier's guardian, while Vivian declares himself one of the restaurant's most frequent customers. Curious, Dennis asks what will happen now, and Stabbage explains that they will perform a blood test, leaving everyone confused. When Stevens pulls out a syringe, Aetlier becomes frightened, as she is afraid of needles. Even so, they must follow the protocol, which is to extract her blood, causing her to faint. Dennis then hands Aetlier over to Vivian, who carries her on his back, while Dennis asks Stabbage about Aetlier's situation because he wants to help her. Stavich explains that the former head of the family, Lord Falmaz, was a master of hypnosis and the most powerful mental manipulation, which impressed Dennis greatly. He adds that this type of magic can only be mastered by certain bloodlines and by people with exceptional talent. He reveals that the Wirch state family specialized in hypnosis, and this makes Dennis wonder if Aetlier has the same talent. Stavich confirms that she does. He also says that her father was a great man who saved many lives with his magic. However, it is believed that his younger brother poisoned him, along with his wife, in order to take his place, and that he exiled Aetlier by casting doubt on the legitimacy of her lineage. He believes they stole everything from her and oppressed her so much that they would never allow her to rise again. And Stavich tells Dennis that, despite all this, Lord Falmaz left a will, and that according to this will, the royal government demanded that the young girl's blood be tested. He leads them to a room where a giant sphere is positioned. He says they used this analysis artifact to prove to the judge that she is the true daughter of Falmaz. Stavich places a drop of Aedlier's blood into a device, and shortly after, he adds a bit of Lord Falmaz's blood, which the royal government preserved. He explains that if the flower-shaped crystal forms, this proves a first-degree blood relationship. He adds that the result would be the same even with her mother's blood, and as suspected, the proof confirms that Aetlier is a direct descendant of Lord Falmaz. Stavich is certain that he will win the case, and a little later, already at the royal court, he gathers once more to verify Aetlier's legitimacy at the request of the royal government. Among those present is her uncle, Lord Joseph, who mocks Dennis, saying that he was expelled from the Silver Wings, and Dennis does not recognize him, asking if he could be one of Vigo's clients. Our protagonist threatens to punish him for treating Aetlier poorly, and the judge warns Dennis to be respectful. But when the judge calls him Dennis Black, Vivian remembers that the famous restaurant they saw earlier shares the same surname. The judge then opens the session, explaining that they have gathered because Lord Falmaz's will stipulates that Aetlier will inherit all of his wealth and property, while Lord Joseph would receive his knowledge and books. The purpose of the court is to determine the validity of the will. The opposing lawyer opens his case by claiming that, although Aetlier is Lord Falmaz's daughter, she is not his legitimate daughter, which causes Dennis to cover Aetlier's ears. The lawyer argues that Aetlier is not worthy of being the main family of mages, and Stavich responds that this is precisely why they have gathered, to confirm whether it is true or not. He then announces that they will extract her blood in front of everyone to prove her right, and Lord Joseph objects, saying they should not waste time and declaring that he is certain of his victory. Dennis loses his temper, but manages to control himself and decides to observe in silence. When Stavich calls the doctors to extract Aetlier's blood, she feels afraid, but Dennis's presence gives her a certain tranquility. The judge then hands a stick to each person, asking them to take them, choosing one at random to define who will activate the magic object. One by one, they try their luck, but none succeed until Dennis asks who managed to get it. Nervously, Stevens raises his hand and advances toward the device. He places a drop of Aetlier's blood, followed by Lord Falmaz's blood, which forms a flower-shaped crystal, confirming the match, and Dennis and Stavich feel relieved. However, he then receives the order to repeat the test using the blood of Lord Falmaz's wife, Lady Alyssa. The result is negative, leaving everyone shocked. Stavich suspects there must be an error and requests a repetition of the test, but Lord Joseph objects, saying they cannot continue repeating it until they get the result they want, assuring them that nothing would change. The chief judge then rejects Stavich's request, and Joseph then asserts that Aetlier could be his brother's daughter, but not his legitimate wife's, which makes her eligibility as a direct heir ineligible. The judge then decides that it has been proven that she is not Lord Falmaz's legitimate daughter, which invalidates the will in its current form and forces him to reinterpret it partially. The judge decides to grant all properties and riches to Lord Joseph, while Aetlier will be left with the books and knowledge. This is a decision that Joseph clearly accepts with pleasure, and at that moment, suddenly, Dennis notices blood on the butler's hand and realizes that something is wrong. He then lunges at him and grabs him by the neck, and Stevens drops a blood-stained handkerchief, and Dennis realizes that he had poured his own blood onto the object to make it function incorrectly. Stevens confesses that Joseph promised to return him to the position of head butler if he did that, but Dennis becomes furious, and his arms are enveloped in flames. The judge orders Dennis to sit down, saying that his behavior is an offense to the court, and our hero responds by asking how he can be offending the court when they are blatantly cheating. He takes 2 sticks and reveals that both are white, proving that everyone was in collusion from the beginning, since Stevens had secretly hidden the red stick. And Dennis realizes that everything was planned and that they were only brought to court to put on a show. Overwhelmed by anger, he loses his control, and his body is enveloped in flames, a burning fire, and the court guards approach to stop him. But upon seeing his fury, they hesitate and stop out of fear. Joseph orders the guards to capture Dennis, but just as he is about to fight them, Vivian intervenes from behind and asks what will happen to Aetlier if he ends up in prison. Vivian's words make Dennis calm down, and then he notices that Aetlier is crying, and shortly after, Stavich talks to him about the consequences of that whole scene. He comments that Dennis's behavior went beyond the limits, but believes the government also will not want to turn this into a problem. Our hero feels very angry with himself, as he believes he should not have brought her there. But Stavich says that Aetlier inherited the family's knowledge and books, so at the very least he should check them once. The idea pleases them, and they decide to go see them. Soon, they arrive at the abandoned house, and once inside, Stavich explains that it used to be a library, but in recent years it became a warehouse. He hopes they might find something valuable there. As they walk, Dennis steps on something and warns Aetlier to be careful, and moments later, as she continues moving forward, she accidentally activates a magic circle. She falls into a hidden room beneath it, and once inside, the lights turn on. While Stavich and Vivian examine the books, they are marveled. They discover that these are rare volumes and diaries of ancient kings, which are very valuable. Some of these books are extremely rare, and Vivian thinks it is a vast treasure composed of valuable grimoires, which are at the level of a national treasure. He gets very excited about these books and feels as if he is holding a black box of sealed magic. Stavich shares the same feeling. Stavich comments that they should immediately call an appraiser. Then Dennis finally feels happy for Aetlier, and Stavich thinks that, in reality, Lord Falmaz wanted her to inherit this instead of the riches, since he knew of his brother's greed and would not allow the inheritance to pass so easily. Thus, he set up this entire trap. And Dennis asks what she would really like to do with the books. To his surprise, Aetlier says she wants them to stay at the restaurant. The next morning, Dennis is waiting for Vivian, and a few minutes later Vivian appears, unable to believe he overslept, and runs to the carriage. On the way, he encounters a man who looks exactly like Dennis, although his aura feels a bit different. At that very moment, Dennis shouts for Vivian to hurry up, and the man, upon hearing that name, comments that it is a good name, quite beautiful. After Vivian departs, a girl named Florence appears, addressing the man as Master Helf. She asks who that boy was, and Helf explains that he was the companion of a colleague he had mentioned before. The following day, business at the restaurant is going very well, and a long line of customers waits outside just to get a seat. Most of them are mages and sorcerers, which makes Henrietta and Vivian think they must be hearing rumors about the magic books Aetlier inherited. Some mages read the books while they eat and are surprised to see that they actually exist. Until now, these books were only famous legends, and having them there in plain sight makes people wonder what kind of restaurant this is. Just then, Dennis shouts, saying he does not care if they read while they eat, but as soon as they finish, they must leave immediately, because that is a restaurant, not a library. Dennis works hard to keep up with the avalanche of orders, and it is very clear that he is doing a great job. Then, a somewhat nervous mage says he has an important question. Noting that Dennis seems quite irritated, the mage first apologizes for bothering him, and shortly after, he explains that after reading one of the magic books, he may have found a cure for his wife's illness and asks if he can borrow it. Dennis does not answer directly. Instead, he calls Aetlier to deal with it, and Aetlier approaches and tells the mage that he can indeed borrow the book. Upon hearing this, the other mages also ask to borrow books, but Dennis refuses, saying that was a special case, and the mage thanks them sincerely and leaves. As more customers arrive, Dennis decides to speed things up by using his magic while cooking. Vivian notes this and asks if he is sure about using all those skills at once, and our hero simply replies that it is the only way to handle so many orders. Shortly after, a new batch of food is ready to be served. The scene then shifts to a childhood memory of Dennis when he was a poor orphan living on the streets. While he is sitting alone in the rain, someone drops their wallet, and Dennis runs to return it to the lady. She is impressed that despite his condition, he chose to return it instead of keeping it, and surprised, she asks why he returned it. Dennis says he thought she would be in trouble without her wallet, and as a reward for his good deed, She takes him to her home and prepares a meal. Dressed in a chef's uniform, she serves him a dish and asks him to taste it. Dennis takes his first bite. His face lights up because of how delicious the food is, and he eats faster and begins to cry, as he had not tasted a home-cooked meal in a long time. Back in the present, Dennis wakes from a daze because he hears his name being repeated several times. It turns out that what we just saw was part of his dream, in which he relived some of his most painful childhood memories. Upon waking, Dennis tries to get out of bed, but the others quickly stop him, saying he is still too weak to move, and Aetlier stays by his side, looking at him with deep concern. Even so, Dennis insists, since he needs to get up and prepare food for the customers. Bat-Kun tells him firmly to stop worrying about the restaurant and focus on his health, and she adds that they have already closed the restaurant for the day so that he can rest. Hearing this, Dennis settles down and apologizes for being a burden, and he looks at Aetlier and asks why she is watching him like that. The others explain that it is because she was extremely worried, to the point of imagining what would happen if he never woke up again. Dennis laughs and guarantees that he is much stronger than they think, and shortly after, he falls asleep once more. They recall that the doctor said Dennis only caught a cold, but they suspect it is actually because he has been working too hard. After returning from the capital, he did not take a single break, and they decide that when Dennis wakes up next time, they will ensure he rests properly. The group then begins to leave the room, but they stop upon noticing that Aetlier pulls up a chair and sits down next to Dennis. When they ask what she is doing, she simply replies that she will stay there to wait for him to wake up. Later, Vivian, Henrietta, and Bat-Kun continue to be worried about Dennis's condition and would very much like to be able to do something for him. Bat-Kun proposes preparing some rice porridge for Dennis to eat when he wakes up, and she believes that if the flavor is good, he will regain his energy. Vivian likes the idea, saying that food is closely linked to good health, and Henrietta also agrees, suggesting they hurry to have everything ready. But things take a strange turn when Vivian notices that Henrietta is wearing her full armor. Vivian asks why she is wearing that in this place, and she responds that it is because they are going to use fire and other dangerous tools. Vivian cannot help but wonder how much fire she plans to use for a simple bowl of porridge. Henrietta then enters the kitchen to look for some ingredients and ends up pulling out a massive piece of meat. She says it only needs salt to be delicious, and Vivian realizes the girl has completely forgotten that they were supposed to prepare rice porridge. When Henrietta unsheathes her sword to cut the meat, Vivian ends up stopping her, worried that she might break the entire kitchen in two. They begin to argue back and forth, and Bat-Kun enters and is surprised by how quickly things got out of hand in such a short time. At that moment, Stavich walks through the door. Vivian turns around and is surprised to see him appear so suddenly. Upstairs, Aetlier continues with Dennis, waiting patiently for him to wake up. She notes that the ice pack has slipped, so she stands up and measures his temperature, and he is still somewhat feverish. She begins to blame herself for how exhausted he is, remembering how Dennis is always forced to protect and defend her. Feeling gratitude toward him, she gently places the pack on his forehead with a small smile on her face, whispering that she hopes he can wake up soon. Meanwhile, Dennis is lost in another dream about his childhood, and he sees the young Dennis jumping through a window after making a joke with the head chef. She is chopping a cabbage so finely that it has practically turned into powder, and this woman is the one who took him in, the head of the Black's restaurant. Her second in command is there complaining that Dennis should be more grateful since she took him off the streets, and he suggests she reprimand him to prevent it from happening again. But she only says that Dennis is too stubborn to be reprimanded, and she thinks that one day he will mature on his own. Later that day, the young Dennis runs excitedly to the main dining hall with a plate of fried rice, thinking he has just perfected his recipe. He enters looking for someone to taste it, and the aroma attracts the attention of a high-ranking customer, who calls him over and praises Black's restaurant for training such young chefs. She takes a bite, but is immediately thrown back by the terrible taste. The second in command runs over to check, looking at Dennis and asking what he did this time, while the others rush to attend to the lady and apologize for the discomfort. The head chef arrives, curious about all this fuss, and the second in command explains to her that Dennis served something strange to the customer. She sees Dennis with a plate in his hands and immediately understands the situation. She takes the plate, casts a magic spell on it, and places it back in front of the customer. The woman hesitates, remembering the first bite, but decides to try once more. To her surprise, the dish is now delicious, and she is filled with admiration. She asks how this is possible. The head chef explains that Dennis simply forgot the secret ingredient, and on that day, Dennis approaches his tutor with a look of guilt, apologizing for the dish. She is not angry. She only tells him that it is fine, as long as he now understands the importance of using the correct spells. Dennis leaves crying, admitting that at that moment he truly thought he had perfected his fried rice. She comforts him, saying that nothing is wrong and that he only needs to study more. After drying his tears, Dennis asks her how she managed to fix the food so quickly. She admits she realized he had used as many disassembly skills as combination ones, but he still did not understand how she was able to fix everything so fast. She replies that it was easy. After all, it is the legend of fried rice. Upon hearing this, Dennis smiles and declares that he also wants to become a legend of fried rice. Back in the present, our hero is sleeping peacefully, and Aetlier has also fallen asleep by his side while watching over him. Downstairs, the others are still trying to figure out why Stavich appeared so suddenly. He explains that he is a magic enthusiast and that he came to read one of the magic books Aetlier inherited. There is one book in particular that he is very anxious to see, and as soon as he heard it was at the restaurant, he hurried over. But when he discovered that Dennis is sick and that they are cooking for him, Stavich says the book can wait, as he prefers to help them prepare the dish. He then asks what they are making, and they say it is rice porridge. But Stavich interrupts, saying they must first focus on cooking the rice before preparing the porridge. He explains that only by betting on a perfect bowl of rice can one complete the actual process of making the porridge. For now, the main discussion must be about how to cook rice perfectly using magic. Vivian and Bockel are quite excited by the idea, but Henrietta does not seem to be in the mood. Stavich mentions that before following the path of the law, he was a passionate researcher. Hearing this, Bockel suggests using fire spells to cook. However, he points out that the intensity of the heat varies according to the imagination, and the user's skill is also essential. Vivian agrees, saying that if the flame is uneven, the rice will become sticky or too dry. Stavich then proposes using the spectral flame of ghost fire, explaining that with ghost fire, the intensity of the heat depends entirely on the magic energy used. Poor Henrietta is already overwhelmed by so much magic talk and just watches them. Then, Bockel mentions the use of a crust in the recipe, which confuses Henrietta even further. She does not believe a crust is necessary at all, and the three continue debating which method to use. But Henrietta is so lost that she just sits down. After this long discussion, they finally reach a decision. They will use both ghost fire and normal fire. Stavich says that any difference in heat caused by double casting can be resolved by using a pot with a magic catalyst to stabilize the temperature, concluding that this is the best way to cook perfect rice with magic. Vivian and Bockel celebrate the decision, but soon wonder if they should also use magic to transform the rice into a delicious porridge. Before they get into that, Vivian suggests a break, since the conversation is getting a bit too strange, and Bockel agrees, while Henrietta drinks her tea, still feeling excluded and commenting that magic is much more complicated than she imagined. At that moment, the merchant enters, saying he heard Dennis is sick, so he brought a magazine as a gift. Henrietta is happy, saying it is very kind of him, until the merchant adds that due to Dennis's condition, he will sell it at half price, and Vivian immediately reprimands him for still charging Dennis even when he is sick. Meanwhile, Henrietta looks at the magazine and sees a photo of a very elegant pot. The merchant says that with that rice cooker, making delicious rice is very easy, and Henrietta doubts it can make rice porridge. But the merchant says it has a special mode for making porridge. She asks if it makes sense to use both ghost fire and normal fire before making porridge. But the merchant says that is useless, because if you just boil the water and use raw rice, you will get the porridge. The others are surprised that the process is nothing like they imagined, and the merchant warns that, for this reason, it is dangerous to let people who do not cook enter the kitchen. Just at that moment, Aetlier enters, and they ask about Dennis. She says he has a fever, but it is going down. When she discovers they are preparing rice porridge for him, she suggests adding eggs to make it more nutritious. Henrietta ends up loving the idea, and Aetlier cracks the eggs into a bowl and beats them with a special technique. The others are surprised by her skill, since she learned it from Dennis himself. But they quickly change the subject, talking about culinary preferences. Bockel says she loves sweet tamagoyaki, while Vivian prefers the bitter kind. Henrietta is questioned about her likes and dislikes. She thinks for a moment and says there is one thing she absolutely cannot eat, and that is leather shoes. Vivian and Bockel are surprised by the randomness of the comment, and Henrietta explains that in her family, leather shoes were considered edible. I do not think that is how it works, but alright, to each their own culture. Anyway, Henrietta says she does not like the taste very much, and Vivian and Bacchus give her uncomfortable pats on the shoulder and suggest changing the subject. Later that night, Dennis wakes up just as Aetlier enters. Moments later, she serves him rice porridge with egg that everyone helped to prepare. Dennis takes the first bite, remembers his childhood, and says he likes it because it is warm and comforting. Aetlier is happy to hear this, and he asks if she made it. She says she prepared the eggs, but it was the merchant who made the porridge. When he hears this, he gives a very loud shout, demanding to know why they let the merchant of all people handle that part. The next day, Henrietta returns happily, skipping from the market, and one of her favorite merchants notices her good mood and shouts to her, saying she looks happier than usual. Henrietta continues walking forward and sees Vivian walking just ahead and calls out to him. Vivian stops to greet her but immediately notices a large bag she is carrying and asks about it. Henrietta laughs and explains that she was so excited about today's banquet that she ended up buying too many things. Hearing this, they decide to walk together, and on the way, a nearby vendor interrupts them and asks why they are on the street at that hour, since it is now lunchtime at the restaurant and it is very rare to see them there at this time. Henrietta explains that the restaurant is closed because today is a very special day for them. Meanwhile, Aetlier and Bacchus come out from behind the curtains and see Dennis packing a bag. Both say they are ready, which makes Dennis happy. But when he looks at Aetlier, he notices she is wearing her apron and quickly tells her that she will not need the apron for what they are going to do today. Just at that moment, Henrietta and Vivian return, apologizing for making everyone wait. Now that everyone is together, Dennis suggests they depart immediately, but Henrietta proposes doing a review of the supplies first to ensure nothing important was forgotten. After the review, she adds that the next step is to take a bath before the banquet begins. Later, during the bath, Vivian ensures there is nothing wrong, and he is quite surprised to see Dennis shirtless for the first time. He cannot believe the guy is simply a monster and marveled. He even reaches out his hand to touch him. But Dennis, with an air of superiority, looks and says that is what a real man should look like. Then he asks Vivian why he continues to maintain a body as thin and slender as that. And embarrassed, Vivian covers himself and says he is a mage, so he does not need a very muscular body. Even so, he cannot help but ask how Dennis managed to obtain such an almost divine figure. Dennis explains that it is simple. He did 2,000 push-ups every day, and in a short time, he became like this. Hearing that, Vivian trembles with shock, knowing he could never do something like that. Putting that aside, Dennis reminds Vivian that this bath should be a moment of bonding between them. He tells him to take off his towel, but Vivian trembles just at the thought and immediately moves away. This talk from Dennis is very strange, but anyway, Dennis is there trying to convince him while the girls are enjoying their own bath. While Henrietta washes Aetlier's hair, Bacchus cannot help but admire Henrietta's well-developed assets. She happens to hear this and is confused, saying she does not think their bodies are that different. But Bacchus smiles and insists that in terms of impact, the difference is quite clear. Aetlier, however, pays no attention to the conversation. She just wants to relax and enjoy her bath. Later that same night, the main event finally arrives. The group gathers in the forest for the banquet, with plates of delicious food served before them. Before they begin to eat, each one has to say something for which they are grateful or make an important announcement. Dennis then suggests that Henrietta should be the first. Upon hearing this, Henrietta becomes nervous and states that she does not want to do it. But Dennis continues to pressure the poor girl until she finally gives in and stands up. She speaks with some stiffness at the beginning, so the others ask her to relax and be herself. In the next moment, she speaks from her heart, even with tears in her eyes, saying that she is truly grateful to have friends who care about her. Furthermore, she is also grateful for having found a job, and everyone applauds with joy. Henrietta explains that this time she will not be working with a group of adventurers. Instead, she secured a job with the knights, and after thinking about the matter, she realized she wanted a job where she could help people, no matter what happened. Then, it is Vivian's turn. He stands up with confidence and announces that he has finally found the next party to join. It may not be the largest or most famous group in the world, but it does not matter, because it brings him closer and closer to his dream of becoming a great mage. The others applaud, congratulating him on getting the job. But then Vivian's expression changes. He then turns to Henrietta and says that he does not think they are equals, because unlike her, he at least pays for his meals. Dennis intervenes, joking that Henrietta has even become a bit more conceited lately. Now it is Bacchus' turn. She stands up and announces that she will return to her home, and everyone is quite shocked to hear this. Bat-Kun explains that after spending time with her parents, she plans to go to the capital and become a master at a magic school. Dennis adds that Bat-Kun was so talented that she was invited to teach even before she graduated. Hearing about all these achievements of hers, Dennis proposes raising their glasses and toasting to the good news. And shortly after, the banquet truly begins. The expressions on their faces make it clear how much they enjoy the food, and everyone seems to be having a lot of fun. Until suddenly Vivian becomes sad, realizing that soon everyone will go their own separate ways. He says that when they are gone, the place will become very lonely, and Henrietta feels the same. She begins to think about asking the knights to postpone her assignment, and Bat-Kun even supports her idea, but Dennis hears them and calls them idiots. He reminds them that they are finally about to change things and manage to get closer and closer to everything they dreamed of. And if these goals are truly important to them, they should never think about abandoning them. Dennis's words make everyone return to reality, and they end up agreeing with the young man. Excited, Henrietta becomes overly enthusiastic and declares that she will leave the city tomorrow morning. But Aetlier quickly tells her to calm down, reminding her that her work has not even started yet. Later, Dennis combines his 5-star food with his magical skills to prepare an irresistible fried rice. Everyone has the dish ready in front of them, but just before everyone starts eating, they notice Polvo, who is in a corner, already devouring a plate of fried rice. While he eats, Polvo explains that he smelled something delicious coming from the forest, so he came to check it out. He praises Dennis, saying that he has never eaten anything that good in his life. Dennis approaches and recognizes him as the perverted shop owner, clearly forgetting his name. And honestly, I almost forgot it too. Aetlier remembers him and calls him Polvo, and he is delighted to see that Aetlier actually remembered his name. He tries to take advantage of the moment to convince her to work for him, but Dennis strikes him on the head before he can continue. Even so, Dennis admits that Polvo helped him a lot when he was sick, and without him, he would never have been able to eat that delicious rice with egg. In addition, Polvo also presented them with a sophisticated rice cooker, so Dennis takes the opportunity to thank him for everything he has done. Now that this is settled, Dennis asks Polvo what the real reason was for him coming there. He explains that he heard they were going to have a barbecue, so he came to invite everyone to a banquet. And with that, he presents a high-quality cut of meat, and everyone lights up with joy upon seeing it. Our hero already thinks he could accept, since Polvo took the trouble to come there, so Polvo's servants throw a piece of meat into the air, and Dennis draws his 2 kitchen knives, cutting it in mid-air into perfectly equal proportions. Shortly after, the meat is cooked and served so that everyone can eat. But upon seeing this, Polvo begins to regret having told Dennis, since Aetlier was the only one he truly wanted to flatter. Shortly after, Aetlier takes a piece of meat and gives it to Dennis, causing Polvo to immediately run to her, begging her to feed him as well. And the wretch insists so much that Aetlier finally gives in. And at that moment, the scoundrel becomes so happy that his nose even bleeds, and shortly after he faints. This guy is a pervert. There is no other way to describe him. Sometime later, when the banquet ends, the girls stand side by side washing the dishes, while Vivian and Dennis sit together happily at the table. Vivian tells Dennis that there is something he has wanted to ask for a long time, and Dennis appears a bit curious, noting that Vivian is speaking in a much more formal manner than usual. Vivian mentions that in court he heard the judge call him Dennis Black, and he wonders if that means Dennis has some kind of connection to the Black restaurant. Dennis decides to be open about it and admits that the head chef who raised him allowed him to use the name. However, after a heavy argument, he left the restaurant forever, and in reality, he no longer wishes to use that name. Intrigued, Vivian asks what the argument was about, and our hero explains that it happened when he was close to reaching level 90. He and the chef had a major disagreement, but now, looking back at the past, he realizes she was right the entire time. She was merely trying to warn him not to become too arrogant, and Vivian is quite surprised to hear that Dennis also had a proud phase, admitting he does not understand how Dennis could have become so grumpy. He explains that although level 99 was already the peak for him, he was desperate to reach level 100. This desire drove him to leave the Black restaurant to test himself, and after that, he traveled all over the world, trying to prove to the chef that he was right. To summarize the story, Dennis ended up staying for the longest time with the Silver Wings Battalion, and despite everything, he admits they took good care of him while he was there. But in the end, he never managed to reach level 100. Meanwhile, in the city, 2 of Dennis's regular customers walk down the street, trying to decide what to eat, and after a brief discussion, they finally decide on Katsuden. They arrive at Dennis's restaurant, only to feel disappointed to see that it is closed. Just at that moment, two thugs appear. One of them pushes the purple-haired girl to the ground, and while the blonde girl tries to defend her, the man ends up threatening her and pushes her away. He even takes out his knife to threaten her, and in response, the blonde mage decides to teach them a lesson, invoking a magic arrow and shooting one of them right in the back. At the same time, the other girl stands up and uses her earth magic to manipulate the ground beneath them, causing them to lose their balance. Seeing the two thugs in that pathetic state, the girls feel proud of themselves, saying that is what happens to those who push them without apologizing. But just at that moment, they hear a loud crash behind them, and a large crowd has gathered. When they look back, they see the unthinkable. Dennis's restaurant is entirely engulfed in flames. Meanwhile, Dennis and the others are returning from the hot springs when they notice signs of fire coming from the city. At first, Dennis does not care much, assuming it is just someone making a campfire. But then, as dark thoughts invade his mind, his eyes widen. Without thinking twice, he runs toward his restaurant, desperately hoping it is not what he is imagining. Moments later, Dennis arrives and stands paralyzed, seeing that his restaurant is completely engulfed in flames. The others soon catch up to him and are equally shocked, unable to believe what he is seeing. Dennis remains motionless for nearly a minute, unable to move or react. The gathered citizens see how dangerous the fire is becoming and shout, asking if anyone present can use water magic. Upon hearing this, Dennis and his team prepare to intervene, but before they can act, the two girls catch Dennis's attention, explaining that the two men who attacked are the ones responsible for starting the fire. Vivian looks at the men and immediately recognizes them as members of the Night Mist group. One of them even mocks him, saying that Dennis is always full of himself, so this is exactly what he deserves. The other adds that it was not just them, stating that the Night Mist group, the Silver Wings, and even the Worstad House were part of the attack. Their sole objective is to destroy Dennis in any way possible. And a few minutes later, the fire is finally extinguished. The restaurant is now completely destroyed, and our hero enters the charred remains. Memories of when the restaurant was new and full of life flood back to him. Upon seeing this, Henrietta bursts into tears, realizing that all the effort they put into the place was erased in an instant. Vivian, on the other hand, begins to blame himself, saying it is his fault, since those men only attacked Dennis because he had saved him. Hearing this, Bakul also blames herself, insisting that it was her fault the Night Mist group has put them in this delicate situation. Dennis then quickly speaks up to tell them not to think that way, because none of them did anything wrong. He admits he is deeply surprised because he never expected the Silver Wings to be involved, and assumes it must have been Joseph who ordered Vigo to pass the commands to the battalion. In reality, Dennis believes the Night Mist group is the least to blame, as they merely followed orders from superiors. With a heavy sigh, he admits it is his own fault for meddling in other people's affairs without permission, and once again acknowledges that he became far too irritated. Vivian tries to encourage him, saying that they all work together to defeat their enemies. But before he can finish, Dennis interrupts him and tells them not to worry, stating that he will simply open a small restaurant in another city. The others are shocked by his words and try to convince him to fight against the Silver Wings, but Dennis says it is not that simple. He knows he is strong individually, but the reality is that the most powerful noble house in the kingdom has now allied themselves with the strongest group of adventurers. To him, it is quite clear that he is not yet strong enough to deal with that kind of force alone. So, instead, Dennis simply smiles and thanks everyone for everything they have done for him so far. As he walks away, Aetlier demands to know where the real Dennis is. The real Dennis would gladly become an enemy of the entire kingdom if it meant protecting what he loves. But Dennis does not even turn around. He only replies that he has finally accepted his situation. Later, while going up the stairs, he feels relieved to see that the money he had saved is still intact. He takes the money, preparing to leave everything behind. And at that moment, Aetlier wears a sad expression. She asks if he is truly sure about leaving the city so suddenly. Dennis explains that he knows if he dares to face those people, they will never stop pursuing him, and his greatest fear is that someone close to him might die if he tries to resist. That is why his plan is simply to leave the city before that happens. Aetlier then asks Dennis if she can go with him. He says that she certainly can, and suddenly, he realizes he should apologize to her, since all her books were burned in the fire. But Aetlier shakes her head, saying she did not care about that. What truly matters to her is that the customers are happy. The two clench their fists, and Dennis reassures her, saying that as soon as everything settles down, they will take a trip and return there together. Meanwhile, Vivian and the others remain outside before the ruins of the burned restaurant with sad faces. But at that moment, a group of men begins to approach slowly, and hearing the sound of footsteps, Vivian turns around. To his surprise, his eyes widen when he sees them clearly. Shortly after that, Dennis comes out with Aetlier and is quite surprised to see that his entire group is surrounded by a crowd of people. Basho steps forward and declares there is no way Dennis can run away and abandon everything. Henrietta agrees, adding she never imagined Dennis would be such a coward. Then, Vivian points at Dennis, saying he finally understands everything. He explains that Dennis is the type of person who cannot stand to see someone he loves suffer. But when he is the one who is hurt, he does not even care. Vivian then continues by reminding Dennis that all those people gathered there left the safety of their homes in the middle of the night for his sake. They want him to understand one thing: what hurts him also hurts them. Vivian emphasizes that they were all rejected once, abandoned by their old teams who considered them useless. But now they have found each other, and it is this group that Dennis simply wants to turn his back on. Basho and Henrietta speak with emotion, telling Dennis that this is his place, and nowhere else. Suddenly, Polvo steps forward, saying that no one dares to attack his precious Aetlier and go unpunished. Shortly after that, the two girls from before and their group of knights join in, declaring they are also willing to fight with Dennis against the Silver Wings. Henrietta tells Dennis to stop this nonsense and finally accept their help once and for all. Our hero looks at the entire crowd, dozens of people in front of him, all of them offering their strength, and he feels overwhelmed. In that moment, he realizes how pathetic he has been. These are the same people to whom he said he would never abandon what was important to him, and now he is about to do exactly that. With this realization, Dennis's spirit ignites, and he declares that he is going to stay in that city, and he is going to fight for what belongs to him. After all, he cannot risk being called a coward for the rest of his life, and the crowd explodes in joy at his declaration. When things calm down, Henrietta suggests they invent a team name to unify them. Aetlier intervenes, proposing the Outcast's restaurant. Dennis listens and admits it sounds quite intense, and Vivian loves it. He says it fits perfectly, since everyone is a reject in some way. And with Dennis as the leader, Vivian insists that he must say a few words. Dennis does so and gives a short but motivating speech that ignites everyone even further. Then Vivian asks his big question: what is the plan? Dennis thinks, but before he can answer, Kate arrives running. She calls out to Dennis, devastated for not having arrived sooner, apologizing on behalf of the Silver Wings for the fire. They insist it is not her fault, and Dennis does not reproach her, as he knows she was not to blame. Even so, Kate cannot rid herself of the guilt. She heard Vigo plotting everything, and as soon as she could, she ran to warn Dennis. But having arrived too late consumes her from within. If only she had arrived in time, she thinks she could have prevented everything. Dennis tells Kate not to beat around the bush, but there is something much more important now for which he will need her help. He asks her to share all of Vigo's movements, because he does not intend to let this pass. At first, Kate lowers her head in apology. She admits that, although Vigo truly acted on his own, and she could not stop his plan, she still feels as guilty as he is, since she is the sub-captain of the Silver Wings, and her duty, above all, is to protect her squad. For that reason, she categorically refuses to reveal Vigo's movements, saying that doing so could put the Silver Wings in danger. With those words, she turns and walks away calmly, and Dennis does not argue. Deep down, he knows how difficult it must be for her to deal with Vigo's whims every day. He realizes that asking her to betray her duty was crossing the line, so, instead of insisting, he sincerely apologizes. And when she hears this, Kate stops and then begins to reveal information. However, she does it as if she were talking to herself, without saying it directly to him. The scene then changes to the group traveling in a carriage through the mountain. During the journey, everyone is impressed and wide-mouthed when, out of nowhere, Dennis reveals that Jean Black, the head chef of the Black restaurant, is actually his adoptive mother. As if that were not impressive enough, he further reveals that she is one of the few people Dennis knows who has reached level 100. The others become very quiet and impressed, imagining what Dennis's childhood must have been like, growing up under such a formidable chef. But what shocks them most is how rare that is. In their era, the average person only reached around level 60. Even among the few talents who managed to surpass that limit, only a few reach level 80 and even fewer level 90, and in most cases, those who climb so high almost always stagnate at level 99. Vivian cannot contain his amazement and explains that someone who actually reaches level 100 is not just a master. They are a ranked sovereign, a figure destined to be remembered in history. Dennis places his palm on his face and tells him to calm down. Even so, Vivian continues, and Dennis even says that Vivian is not wrong about Jean's prestige, but explains that she never trained her magic for battle. She dedicated everything to the kitchen. This revelation leaves Vivian completely speechless, and Dennis continues. He explains that in terms of combat, Jean is nothing impressive compared to him, but as a chef, she is insuperable. Not only is she the best in her craft, but her influence in the capital is enormous. And if you are looking for powerful allies, there is no one better to turn to than her. Vivian questions how Dennis can be so sure that Jean will give him a helping hand, and Dennis admits there is no guarantee. There is a high possibility they will simply be rejected right at the door. When the group finally arrives at the capital, everyone is wearing white cloaks, and Dennis separates from the group to visit Jean personally, while the others spread out through the city. Their job is to approach hereditary mages in search of support, and the twins doubt that respected mages would dedicate even a minute if they present themselves dressed like nobodies. But Bockel says that as long as they stay faithful to the plan, everything will work out. The others are already doing their part, so they must give their all as well. Meanwhile, Henrietta approaches a judge to discuss everything that happened at Dennis's shop. She asks if they can open a criminal case based on the incident, and since they already caught those who started the fire, they could use them to track the other involved parties. However, Stavich refuses, stating that it is not that simple. Even if they manage to corner the Night Mist group and arrest its leader, facing the Silver Wings supported by royalty would be almost impossible. Henrietta admits she expected this response, and therefore she arrived prepared. She tells him that she has designed a counter-strategy. Intrigued, Stavich asks her to continue. Back with the others, Polvo is giving some orders while they unload furniture, and his exaggerated energy begins to irritate some members of the group. They say that anyone trained by Polvo could probably manage a shop in a matter of months, but at the cost of becoming a pervert, obsessed with money, a workaholic, and likely on the verge of a breakdown. Polvo hears the complaints and immediately shouts for them to stop complaining and continue working. It is then that he notices Aetlier nearby. Looking inside a box, there is a very strange magical object shaped like a megaphone. Polvo approaches and explains that it is a tool enchanted with wind magic, although it is unfortunately broken, and he says he intends to fix it. Just at that moment, a familiar mage appears, the same one who had borrowed one of Aetlier's books days ago. He then runs to her, returning the grimoire and thanking her sincerely. Thanks to that book, his wife's life was saved. Upon hearing this, Aetlier's face lights up, relieved that her book helped. The mage offers to reward her in some way, but she refuses. Then, seeing the others struggling with heavy boxes, he asks if he can help. He explains that, despite his simple appearance, he is actually a high-ranking mage with control over almost all advanced wind spells. This immediately gives Polvo and Aetlier an idea. Polvo reaches out and suggests that he help them repair the broken megaphone. The mage accepts, and they join their hands for the work. The rest of the day passes with everyone devoted to their assigned tasks, ensuring that everything moves forward without setback. Apparently, the preparation is yielding good results. Everything is going as planned. Meanwhile, Dennis arrives at the doors of his former home, the Black Restaurant. Just as he is about to open the door, he hesitates. Memories flood his mind. The day he left furious and abandoned the place where he had grown up. Dennis finally gathers the courage to enter the restaurant. At first, one of the waiters assumes he is another late customer and says they are already closed. But when he realizes who it is, his eyes widen in surprise and he shouts to everyone, announcing that Dennis has finally returned. In an instant, the entire staff surrounds him, happy and welcoming. But Dennis cuts the mood short, saying that he is only there to speak with Jean. It is then that he looks to the side and is surprised to see Jean Machai, impressed by how much she has grown. She teases him, asking if he is the boss now, since now she is the second in command, and she admits they gave her the title. But she adds with a half smile that she always thought of herself as the interim second in command, keeping the place for the day he would return. With that, she leads Dennis directly to Jean. Inside the kitchen, Jean is busy cutting vegetables, and Dennis is somewhat uncomfortable, thinking about whether to enter or not. But then he is forced to enter and asks her in a low voice how she is. As soon as she hears his voice, Jean immediately knows who it is, and looking back, she says she is happy to see him once more. She says his face looks a bit lighter than before, and jokingly asks if he managed to reach level 100, since that was the objective he used to be obsessed with. Dennis sighs and admits he did not. In reality, he does not even know how he is supposed to get there. Perhaps he never will, exactly as they used to warn him. After all his travels and experiences, he reached this conclusion. Jean's smile fades, and she observes him closely, then asks what he is really doing there. She does not think he is there just for a casual visit. Dennis then sets his insecurity aside and explains the real reason he is there. Kate told him that soon a group of very powerful figures will hold a private meeting. Among them will be the royal court judge, Joseph Werstad, the head of his house, Hopper, the leader of the Night Mist group, and finally Vigo, from the Silver Wings battalion. Dennis insists that a meeting of these four can only mean trouble. And at that moment, after Kate shared this information, she simply left, saying it was already too late for her. But as she departed, she added that she was counting on Dennis. In the present, the head chef continues thinking about these names and admits it will be a quite sinister meeting. And Dennis continues, saying that he does not know their exact objective, but he knows when everyone will be together. This is the moment he plans to attack. Jean asks why he is dragging her into all of this. Dennis simply replies that he needs her help to gather information. Since she is the most respected chef in the capital, he believes she is in the best position to discover what is truly going on. Jean crosses her arms and asks what he plans to do once he has that information. She warns him that, as a chef, she does not respect anyone who ruins a meal. Dennis looks into her eyes with determination, admitting he knows it is a low blow, but says he is willing to face the consequences that will follow. Jean admits that everything Dennis is asking is a lot to process. Her adoptive son suddenly returned after years on his own and immediately makes such a bold request. Dennis never would have imagined this, because she always considered him the type who gives up when things get too difficult. Jean knows that Dennis has always been passionate about helping and training others, but when it came to himself, he always took a step back and put others first. Now, she asks him directly, what is driving him to demand so much of himself this time? Dennis says his motivation comes from the people in his community, those who stand by his side until the end. He refuses to let them down by giving up halfway. Hearing this, Jean feels relieved. For the first time, she sees that Dennis has matured enough to see what truly matters, and with that in mind, she accepts his request. But with only one condition. He must also listen to her advice. And she remembers when she took him off the streets for the first time, how she gave him everything: food, clothes, a home. But there was always one thing she never taught him: the path to finally reaching level 100. And now that he has come so far, she is ready to give him the first clue about it. Moments later, Dennis leaves the restaurant with his white cloak, saying that the clue Jean gave is useless. As he disappears, Jean watches closely, intrigued by the path he will choose later. That night, Jean Machai hands him a lead, and inside are all the details of the meeting that Dennis had requested. With this, he realizes that all preparations are complete. He shares the news with everyone, and together they celebrate with shouts of joy. The next day, at the headquarters of the event organizers, Kate sees Vigo leave the building and runs to him. She asks where he is going. Vigo reminds her that he already told her he is going to settle some matters, and admits it seems like a ridiculous waste of time, but it is something he simply cannot ignore. Kate comments that being a captain must be stressful, so she gives him a pat on the shoulder and wishes him luck. When they part ways, Kate turns around with an expression that becomes very suspicious. Inside his carriage, Vigo reflects in silence, admitting that although his current mission seems like a waste of time, the destiny he truly seeks is far beyond that. It is then that we see a memory from his past. When he was a child, he grew up in poverty, working hard on a farm just to survive, and everyone sympathized with him because of his circumstances. His father had died of a disease, and his mother had abandoned them after falling in love with another man. To make matters worse, his younger brother suffered from a debilitating lung disease. Among those who showed compassion was a noblewoman who always brought food for Vigo and his brother. She, like many others, felt pity for the two of them. So, when the noblewoman walked away, Vigo smiled maliciously at his younger brother, saying he was happy he was there, because thanks to him, he always managed to trick others into acting like philanthropists. One day, after a long day of work on the farm, the brothers were going home when the dog of the nobleman's son began to bark aggressively at Vigo. The strange thing was that the dog completely ignored his younger brother, focusing only on Vigo. The dog's hostile barking infuriated him so much that he finally lost control. And that night, Vigo killed the dog. His brother tried desperately to stop him, but Vigo did not hold back and continued hitting the dog with a hoe, and then turned to his brother, shouting that the dog ate better than they did. The next morning, the nobleman's mage discovered the blood-stained hoe. He then assumed that perhaps the previous night, someone had taken it and killed the dog. and surprisingly, the noblewoman believed her excuse. But the butler was not convinced. He saw blood on Vigo's brother's shirt and grabbed him, accusing him of the crime. Vigo clenched his teeth in frustration. He knew those stains were only there because his brother had embraced the dog's body after they killed it. Unable to let his brother carry the guilt for his own actions, Vigo suddenly kicked a butler in the side and confessed that he was the one who killed the dog. The noblewoman was paralyzed by shock, dropping the sword from her hands before saying that Vigo would have to pay. Later that night, Vigo's brother was still awake, struggling to breathe between coughing fits. At that moment, Vigo returned home after his punishment. His brother ran to greet him, but when he saw Vigo's body, he realized that something had changed. In Vigo's eyes, there was a hardened, implacable hatred that was not there before. That same night, consumed by rage, Vigo set fire to the noblewoman's mansion, reducing all of her possessions to ashes. Fortunately, everyone managed to evacuate in time. From afar, Vigo watched the flames with pride and declared that now that he had taken everything from them, they would finally be forced to descend from their pedestals, as they were all equal now. Vigo's younger brother could already notice that something inside him had changed. Uneasy, he began to retreat slowly, and Vigo turned to say that they should leave. But when he looked once more, his brother was no longer there. Vigo simply smiled, realizing that his path was one he would have to walk alone. From that day forward, Vigo trained every day with a wooden sword, until the skin of his palms was hard and wounded. Over time, he decided to test his strength by challenging a group of adventurers, and he defeated them easily without even breaking a sweat. Shortly thereafter, Vigo joined the Silver Fang troop. There, he was welcomed by his captain, and at the time his level was 80, which made him the strongest member of the group after Gadius. Impressed, Gadius placed great hopes in him, and Vigo quickly proved his worth by defeating several goblins alone while his companions completed missions. One day, after Vigo finished with a wave of monsters and the troop was resting, Gadius approached him. He asked Vigo to speak in private. Alone, Gadius asked why he always chose to fight by himself. He explained that working with his companions would make things easier, but Vigo replied coldly that there was no point in defeating monsters if it was easy. Hearing this, Gadius realized that Vigo must be aiming for level 100, and he decided to offer some advice. Groups do not exist solely to help one level up. But before he could continue, a massive dragon emerged from a cave. Gadius did not panic, explaining that this particular dragon was shy and would not attack unless provoked. But instead of retreating, Vigo deliberately used a magic-imbued knife to wound the dragon. The injury caused the beast to enter a state of unrestrained fury, and Gadius turned to question Vigo about what he had done. But he was nowhere to be found. When Gadius faced the dragon again, the creature devoured him immediately. The next day at the guild, the troop was devastated, mourning the loss of their captain, who had been murdered by the cave dragon. With Gadius dead, everyone turned to Vigo, the strongest among them, and asked him to become their new leader. Vigo accepted the position with a smile, stating that it would be an honor. However, it was not long before the troop grew weary of Vigo's relentless leadership. One by one, the members left the group, and Vigo began to recruit more capable adventurers in their place, declaring that the era of the Silver Fang troop had ended. He renamed them the Silver Ace Battalion. Back in the present, Vigo's driver announced that they had reached their destination, and he stepped out and entered a luxurious hotel. After knocking on one of the doors, he bowed respectfully and greeted Lord Joseph, saying it was an honor to have been invited there that day. Vigo walks toward the curtains and closes them all, stating that he cannot take the risk of being observed by others. He further mentions that, as requested, he reserved the entire hotel, and Joseph comments that this is very meticulous of him. While eating, Vigo informs Joseph that, as promised, Dennis's restaurant was set on fire. He praises Hopper, the leader of the Night Mist Troop, for performing such legendary work. Vigo continues, saying that even if it is suspected that he gave the order, he already has a high-ranking judge in the palm of his hand. Hearing this, Joseph smiles. If everything continues as planned, their futures are guaranteed. But Joseph does not plan to stop there. Now that he has gathered influence in the legal, military, and political fields, he plans to rule the Shadow Kingdom, and he raises his glasses in a toast. Joseph acknowledges that it was Dennis who brought them all together in the first place. And at that moment, Vivian enters, disguised as a mage, pushing a food cart into the room. Vigo stands up immediately, stating that he was not permitted to enter without authorization. Joseph waves him off, encouraging him to calm down, and Vivian explains that the cook had forgotten to serve the final dish. He lifts the tray lid, revealing a plate of fried rice more appetizing than anyone at that table had ever seen. Everyone except Vigo is surprised. Joseph then begins to eat immediately, devouring the rice in a very barbaric manner, amazed by how delicious it is. Vigo comments that Joseph's table manners are getting out of control. Joseph always believed that fried rice was a peasant dish, but he cannot believe how good it is, and the others taste it and also agree that it is incredible. With enthusiasm, Joseph orders Vivian to bring more dishes along with the chef who prepared it. He wants to hire him as his personal cook. Vigo observes the entire scene, silently judging Joseph. In his eyes, Joseph is a despicable man, someone who never practices magic, only assuming the power stolen from others. The others are no better, and the judge in particular is nothing more than a miserable man who abuses his position to receive bribes and favor. Even so, Vigo smiles to himself. To him, they are nothing more than fools, and when the time comes, he will not hesitate to get rid of them all. Then, in this way, he will rise as a hero who saved everyone from those vulgar criminals. This title will grant him the rank of a noble, and from there, he will be able to found a powerful noble house, respected by all. And one day, he also plans to overthrow the king himself and rule the nation with an iron fist. Only then, in that way, will he be happy. The man is not satisfied with little. He wants everything. Upon taking the first bite of the fried rice, Vigo stops. The flavor is strangely familiar, and in the next moment, his eyes open in surprise as he realizes where he had tasted it before. At that same moment, the chef walks through the door with a paper bag covering his face. He removes it and reveals himself to be Dennis. He looks at the others and declares that he has come to make them pay for burning down his restaurant. In a panic, Joseph orders Vigo to do something, and Vigo unsheathes his sword and demands to know what Dennis's intentions are. I believe they are already quite clear, but to leave no doubt, Dennis declares that he is going to take down every single member of Joseph's gang, including Vigo. Vigo then says that it will be useless to kill high-ranking men. This would only earn Dennis an unthinkable punishment, perhaps even the death penalty. Dennis says he does not care. He is there only to repay evil with evil. This audacity surprises Vigo, as he seems nothing like the Dennis he once knew. Our hero then lets out a heartbreaking cry, and everyone in the room except Vigo falls to their knees, trembling in terror as the cry resonates. Joseph becomes so overwhelmed by fear that he collapses and confesses that he was the one who gave the order to set fire to Dennis's restaurant. Vigo watches in disbelief, wondering why everyone is suddenly terrified of Dennis. Looking closer, he sees Dennis channeling his magic intimidation technique called terrorizing voice. The spell forces his victims to tell the truth and confess their crimes. Vigo even tries to stop him, but it is already too late. Dennis then calls for Vivian, asking if he recorded all the confessions. Vivian confirms that he did, and furious, Vigo charges at them with his sword. But the mage and Vivian jump through the window just in time, running to the edge. Vigo looks down and stays mouth agape. Below, the area is filled with the most powerful and wise renowned mages of the capital, all looking up at him. Dennis smiles at Vigo and declares, "Welcome to the new Outdoor Adventurers restaurant." Vigo is clearly furious, asking why all the mages of the capital have also gathered there. The mages then step forward and accuse him, saying they heard that he and the judge worked together to burn down Dennis's restaurant, an act that also destroyed the precious treasures they valued so much. They declare that they cannot stand idly by after such a crime. Then Dennis raises his voice, reminding Vigo that the laws of this nation are upheld by its mages and sages. This means that they will be the ones to judge his case, and Stavit takes the lead. After careful deliberation, the mages declare Vigo guilty. They then expose and dismantle his corrupt allies, and Vigo remains enraged and bitter because his plans have collapsed before his very eyes. On the other side, Dennis is mocking him, saying that he deserved all of this. The tension between the two skyrockets, and it is quite clear that they are about to face each other in battle. Both brandish their magic swords, and the fight explodes. Their skills seem balanced, although Vigo appears to be slightly ahead. In the middle of the battle, the story flashes back to the day Dennis and Vigo first met. Kate introduced Dennis to Vigo, and as soon as he saw him, Vigo used his appraisal skill and discovered Dennis's great culinary ability. Vigo joked that Dennis was nothing more than a chef, and Dennis was quite offended, ready to talk back. But Kate rushed in to intervene and calm them down. She told Vigo that Dennis's food was incredible, and that he would be an excellent addition to the team. Even though he had not been impressive at first, Vigo eventually gave in and accepted Dennis joining the Silver Aces. but only on one condition, that he work hard to prove his worth. From that day forward, Dennis officially became a member of the Silver Aces. A few days later, the group was seen inside a dungeon after defeating a powerful monster, one that only Vigo had the strength to defeat. After this victory, it was time to eat, and Dennis proudly displayed a huge piece of meat, announcing that he would prepare hamburgers for dinner. Kate and the others were excited by the idea. While Dennis prepared the food, Vigo started a conversation with him. He told Dennis to be prepared, explaining that if his calculations were correct, a much stronger monster was hiding in the depths. Dennis asked why Vigo was even worried. Their mission was only to defeat one monster, which they had already done. But Vigo shrugged and said it was boring just to follow orders. He set his sword aside and boldly asked Dennis why he was so determined to reach level 100 first. Dennis hesitated. He truly did not have a clear reason, so it took him a while to find an answer, and before he could speak, his attention drifted. The meat was starting to burn. Shortly after, the food was ready, and everyone began to eat. Kate, in particular, seemed enchanted and enjoyed her food. They even handed a plate to Vigo, and after tasting the food, he admitted it was surprisingly good. Kate even asked for seconds. As Dennis served more food, she thanked him from the bottom of her heart. She said that thanks to him, the Silver Aces were doing so well. Dennis was confused by her words, but Kate explained that the potions he had been secretly preparing and delivering had been a great help to the group. Even Vigo, though too indifferent to say it out loud, was also grateful for Dennis's kindness beyond cooking and preparing potions. When one of their members was expelled for cooking, Dennis stopped him before he left, giving him a small handful of rice balls to cheer him up and wishing him luck on his next journey. It was a gesture so simple yet so genuine that it left a mark on everyone present. A few weeks later, Dennis, Vigo, and Kate appeared before the nobles to apologize after the Silver Aces failed one of their missions. Surprisingly, the nobles were not upset. Instead, they mocked the trio, joking that it would have been more fun if one of them had actually died. Vigo became furious at the insult, ready to unleash his magic on the arrogant nobles. But before he could act, Dennis quickly intervened and calmed him down. That night, on his way back to the restaurant, Vigo could not hide his frustration and slammed his fist on the table, furious because the nobles showed no respect to his group. He swore that one day he would make them pay and that they would crawl at his feet. Dennis, however, did not seem to care at all. Instead, he calmly bit into his chicken. He was more focused on eating than on revenge. The scene returns to the present, where the brutal battle between Dennis and Vigo continues. This time, Vigo manages to completely overpower Dennis, using his destruction skill to shatter Dennis's kitchen knives in a single devastating blow. Dennis looks at him in disbelief and retreats quickly, realizing that if he takes another hit like that, he will die. Determined, Dennis uses his magic to sharpen his senses and prepare his weapon. With his knives restored and his reflexes enhanced, he readies himself firmly for another round. Vigo mocks him, asking why he is fighting with such passion all of a sudden. The Dennis he knew was always relaxed and never cared enough about anything to risk his life. Even if Dennis has changed, Vigo tells him that he remains nothing more than a spoiled boy, someone who was lucky enough to be taken in by a wealthy mommy. With this insult, Vigo launches another furious attack, and our hero manages to dodge it. But the incessant explosion of his strikes is exhausting him rapidly. Knowing that he will not be able to resist much longer, Dennis makes a decision. He casts a spell that creates a thick curtain of smoke, blocking Vigo's vision. Vigo strikes his sword savagely through the mist, shouting that he always had the wrong impression of Dennis. Then, as the smoke clears, the two continue their exchange, their swords colliding with ferocity. From afar, Henrietta and the others watch in awe. This is how a battle between two level 99 warriors begins, and they are surprised to see that Dennis is holding his own against Vigo. While they are impressed, Aetlir carries an expression of deep concern. She cannot help but ask what will happen if Dennis loses. The fight takes a dark turn when Dennis receives a devastating blow that sends him flying through the air. With his sensory enhancement still active, time seems to slow down around him, and in mid-flight, he begins to reflect. He knows he has to recover before hitting the ground. But even so, what will he do next? Vigo is a relentless monster, and as he spins in the air, Dennis admits something to himself. Vigo may be a true headache, but he is also unquestionably strong. He starts to question how he ended up there. All he wanted was to do something simple: cook the food he loved and have his own restaurant, helping people to earn their trust. He thought that if he did this, he would naturally reach level 100 in a short time. So, at what point did it all go wrong? His thoughts return to his days as a second chef at Restaurant Black. He remembers Jean telling him that he would never reach level 100. To her, no matter how hard he tried, his limit would always be 99. But Dennis never believed her. To him, her words were just nonsense. After all, his level had risen at an incredible speed in recent weeks. He was certain he would catch up to Jean at level 100 shortly. However, Jean told him that he would need something different if he wanted to reach level 100. She assured him that a guy like him, who always did things halfway, would never be able to achieve it. Dennis then asked what he would need. In response, she told him that if he could not figure it out for himself, there was no way to reach level 100. Back in the present, Dennis lands on his feet. He reminds himself why he wanted to become a chef from the very beginning, why he worked so hard preparing all that food. It was simply because the head chef took him in when he had nowhere else to go. He remembers the day Jean served him a delicious plate of fried rice. It was the best he had ever tasted in his life. From that moment on, he knew he wanted to create dishes capable of bringing that same joy to others. He realizes that what he has been chasing all this time is that feeling he had when eating that delicious fried rice. It gave him a special warmth. He wanted to be someone who served food filled with great flavor. Instead of being served, he wanted to be the one serving people. In this way, all the people going through hardships and those facing sad situations would be able to smile and be happy. He wanted to give them the strength to overcome the next day. This was the kind of food he wanted to prepare, and that was why he became a chef. After reaching this conclusion, he loses consciousness, but he wakes up immediately when he hears the voices of his companions calling for him. He looks at them and realizes he has put an expression of concern on their faces. He has to fix things, and Kate even shouts to Dennis, telling him not to lose and to kick Vigo's ass. Then Vigo tries to launch a fatal blow at our hero, but he grips his kitchen knives, preparing to act. Before the impact, he remembers his meeting with Jean, where she told him that level 100 is not a place to arrive at. It is not something you aim for or something you transform into. It is something you are without even noticing. But Dennis's problem was that he did not even know what he was supposed to feel. To explain, Jean told him the story of the blue bird that traveled the world looking for happiness, only to find that its true happiness was closer than it thought. She said that levels worked the same way. There is only a tiny difference between level 99 and 100. It is just a matter of whether what he already possesses manifests itself. Then she placed her finger over Dennis's heart, saying that the key to reaching level 100 lies right there. But he did not know. And now on the battlefield, Dennis understands what she was talking about the whole time. Vigo leaps into the air, ready to attack him. But then, Dennis blocks him. To Vigo's surprise, a rainbow-colored aura envelops Dennis. Everyone can see that he has become much stronger. With this new power flowing within him, Dennis realizes that strength alone is not enough. It is not just about preparing delicious food. He vows to become someone capable of protecting the smiles of those he loves. His energy accumulates, ready to deliver a lethal blow against Vigo. Vigo watches in disbelief, wondering where all this power came from. Vivian and the others watch in wonder, questioning if he finally managed to reach level 100. When the energy stabilizes, Vigo immediately fires a long-range attack at Dennis, but he dodges it effortlessly, as if it were nothing. Our hero then leaps high, delivering a descending strike with his kitchen knife. Vigo blocks them with his sword. Both weapons collide. Pressed by the force, Vigo clenches his teeth, wondering where Dennis got all this strength. At that moment, Dennis unlocks a completely new skill, Forced Local Explosion. With it, he pushes Vigo down, sinking him deeper and deeper into the ground. Vigo realizes he has been taken out of position, but thinks he could recover if he manages to regroup quickly. He even tries to stand up, but his body refuses to move, as the force crushing him is too powerful. At first, Vigo suspects it is some kind of gravity manipulation, but it is not. This pressure is much stronger. Watching from afar, Vivian's eyes widen. He realizes what it truly is, Dennis's unique skill at level 100. Jean agrees, explaining that it is a unique level 100 ability. It is the manifestation of one's reason for being. This is Dennis's innate ability. Meanwhile, Vigo continues sinking into the ground, fighting with everything he has, but it is useless. His body is simply not strong enough to withstand Dennis's power. He can hardly believe that such a devastating skill could even exist in this world. Finally, after several moments, Dennis's energy is exhausted and the technique disappears, breathless. He looks up at the crater and sees Vigo lying there, completely defeated. Realizing that victory is his, Dennis lets himself fall onto his back, but his team rushes to catch him. They praise his strength, saying he was incredible during the battle. Dennis admits he is just very tired and that he would die for a plate of fried rice. They promise to make him the best plate of fried rice he has ever tasted in his life. Just at that moment, Aetlier enters the scene, returning the bracelet to Dennis. The two clench their fists firmly, and Jean, watching from afar, smiles with pride. Dennis has finally unlocked his full potential. After things return to normal, Vigo is out of the picture, and Kate officially takes over as the captain of the Silver Aces. She visits Jean's restaurant, where Jean immediately asks what that sudden increase in Dennis's level was all about. As they talk, Jean changes the subject and asks Kate if she was the one who leaked the information about Vigo and the corrupt nobles. Kate confirms it, explaining it was her way of supporting Dennis in his moment of need. With that cleared up, Jean then asks why she did not support Dennis in his fight against Vigo, since she had the perfect opportunity to intervene in the middle of the fight. Kate explains that it was the first time she saw Vigo fight so seriously, and in truth, she was afraid. She could not force herself to intervene because she felt that if she did, she would likely be split in half at that exact instant. Leaving that aside, she insists that Jean tell her more details about Dennis's level increase. Jean begins by explaining that the maximum limit of humanity is level 100. Only a handful of people in history have reached it, and the requirements necessary to get there are still mostly unknown. Kate agrees, saying she understands that much. But what she does not understand is how Dennis was able to get there. She wants to know Jean's opinion, since Jean is at level 100. Jean explains that level 100 is nothing more than the discovery of the reason why you exist in the world. It is not about skills or techniques that already exist, but about discovering what only you can do. Kate listens but says she did not understand a single word. Jean adds that the fact that she and Dennis were born in this era and reached level 100 is nothing more than a coincidence. Even so, their paths were different. She wanted to become the best chef in world history, while Dennis wanted to become the strongest chef in history, and that was why he chose to protect the smiles of those around him as his true purpose. With this, he needed an ability that could eliminate any intruder, and that was why he created his unique skill, based on coordinates, forced local expulsion. Kate denies it, saying it makes no sense, and that such an ability is not something designed for a chef, as it has nothing to do with the kitchen. But Dennis just laughs and says it is because he is an idiot and a silly guy. And upon hearing this, Kate bursts into tears of laughter. Jean also laughs, but admits with a smile that there is no other chef like him in the entire world. Meanwhile, the Duke eats while his servant Fiorenza observes him in silence. A few moments later, Fiorenza mentions that both Joseph and Vigo were defeated, asking the Duke if this will cause any problems. He replies calmly that it will not cause any trouble at all, but Fiorenza insists that their conspiracies must have been part of a larger plan. He dismisses the idea, saying it would be foolish to depend on people as useless as them. He considered using Vigo as a pawn if the opportunity arose, but now that Vigo is no longer there, it truly does not matter. Upon hearing this, Fiorenza assumed the Duke never expected Dennis to defeat Vigo, but the Duke turns with a smile, saying he always expected Dennis to win after all. He is his younger brother. Meanwhile, on the way back to the restaurant, Vivian and the others arrive to visit Dennis, and are surprised to see that he is healing much faster than normal. Henrietta explains that Dennis is just that way, and his healing ability is on the same level as a monster's. Aetlier then steps forward, handing Dennis a scroll and calling it her little get-well gift. Dennis opens it and looks at it, but he has no idea what he is seeing. Aetlier explains that it is a set of blueprints to rebuild the burned restaurant, and this immediately catches his attention, leaving him shocked. They further mention that Polvo is already making the preparations and has hired some people from the construction guild. But since he could not start building without a plan, the group decided to take on that job and draw one. Dennis is completely grateful, and when our hero examines the drawing more closely, he sees that the layout looks very different from the previous one. Aetlier explains that since they are rebuilding anyway, they thought it would be better to renovate and redesign the interior, and everyone contributed some ideas to improve it. But the layout is nothing like what Dennis expected. For example, Aetlier suggested an enormous bathroom, and Vivian proposed that the entire front of the new restaurant be made of glass to give it a more modern look. But Dennis responds immediately that he does not need that kind of elegant atmosphere. Henrietta's idea was to place a giant aquarium in the center of the restaurant, as many other high-class establishments do. But Dennis refuses, saying that if he bought an aquarium, he knew Henrietta would end up eating all the fish inside. Aetlier's idea is the basement. As Dennis checks the blueprint, she tells him that as soon as the restaurant reopens, it will be a success if he follows her orders and suggestions. This basement facility was made solely to house the employees, and Aetlier feels that if they lived there, they could work as much as they wanted or could, but Dennis responds that what she just described is an exploitative workplace, and he says that so far, all these suggestions have been horrible, so Dennis follows none of them. Several weeks then pass. Regarding Vigo and the corrupt officials, they were all arrested by the royal government as soon as their misdeeds were made public. The position of head of the Workstage family remains vacant, but Aetlier seems to have no intention of taking on that role. That is why the rest of the magical community is already discussing what the next step should be. Investigators from the royal capital are talking about ways to restore all the magic books that were burned during the fire. But the biggest news is that Dennis's new restaurant has already been rebuilt. For this reason, Vivian took the day off from his group and is already heading there. But of course, it will not just be him. Henrietta, who joined the Knights, is also going, and the same goes for Aetlier, who now teaches at a magic school. However, Vivian is quite worried about whether he will ever become the powerful mage he promised others. He thinks there is no point in being upset about it, and that he will just have to wait and see what happens. Meanwhile, in the village, Dennis and Aetlier return from the market after doing some shopping. As they walk, Aetlier sees a very strange-looking bird. Suddenly, she begins to lose herself in her thoughts, and Dennis calls out to her, pulling her out of her trance. Then, both continue through the market, receiving greetings from nearby merchants, and shortly after, they arrive at their restaurant. Dennis puts up the sign with the name of the place, Outcast's Restaurant. He regrets having accepted that name, but Henrietta and the others insist that the name turned out great. A short time later, they go inside and discover that the interior looks exactly like the old restaurant. Dennis confirms this, stating that he never would have built it according to those strange blueprints they made. Seeing this, Aetlier feels a bit upset because she did not get her enormous bathroom. But Dennis simply gives her a pat on the head and asks her to help him with something. Dennis decides to test the kitchen by preparing each of their favorite dishes. As soon as they taste it, everyone finds the food incredibly delicious. Shortly after, Polvo and the twins arrive to celebrate the grand opening. As soon as they arrive, they are greeted with the words, "Welcome to the Outcast's Restaurant." And so, we finish our anime. I hope you enjoyed it. This anime is excellent. If you want to see more, comment down below. Do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. That is it. We are in this together. Thank you, goodbye, and see you in the next video.